All right, I'm gonna call our operations work group meeting to order. I am filling in for Chair Savion Castro for Family Matters. Do we have any public input tonight? Okay, no public input. I'll go right to approval of our minutes. I move to approve the minutes from the operations work group meeting dated October 13th, 2025.
Second.
Thank you, Board Member Muldrow. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All right. Just see if I saw Maya. I don't know if I saw your vote to approve. All right. I saw 4 for sure, and maybe Maya will be.
She just put her hand.
Oh, she did put her hand up. Aye, saw it. Thank you. All right. That passes with 5 of us. Thank you. All right, for tonight's agenda, we have an update on the boundary review. We're also having an update on human resources, an update on food and nutrition, and an update on our 2026-2027 budget development. So I'm gonna pass it over now to Dr. Gothard to take us into our agenda for tonight.
Thank you, President Nichols, members of the board, staff, and community. Before I turn it over to Cindy, I just want to take us through our vision and mission for MMSD. MMSD will be a learning community where all students are valued, challenged, supported, and inspired to reach for their dreams. And our mission is MMSD creates safe and inclusive schools, delivers high-quality instruction, strengthens positive relationships, and partners with families and the community to achieve student self-determination and educational excellence. As you know, board, you also approved a set of guiding commitments back earlier this school year. Lead with equity, foster belonging, deliver meaningful learning, and improve with purpose, and embrace our collective impact. We do have a number of items to bring forward to you tonight, and we're going to first begin with Assistant Superintendent of Strategy and Innovation, Cindy Green.
Thank you so much, Dr. Gothard. Jesse, would you mind going to one more right there? Good evening. So before we get started, I want to take a minute to just let you know that this is the first time that we've formally discussed building for the future. So we are really looking forward to the conversation tonight. A reminder that building for the future really encompasses a future long-range facility plan, our enrollment strategy, and our boundary review. Tonight, we will focus mostly on the boundary review. We have our partners from MGT here as well.
This meeting is being recorded.
We have our partners from MGT that are on with us, McKay and Marcy, that we'll introduce in a moment. Jessica, can you go to the next slide, please? Just a reminder of why we are doing this and why now. Part of that is the city of Madison has a goal by 2030 that they are going to create 15,000 new housing units. And if we are having 15,000 new housing units created in our backyard, we want to ensure that we are thoughtfully planning and proactively planning for what that means for the impact on our schools. Another important note is that while the city of Madison boundary has a certain set of geographical location, it is not the exact same as the MMSD boundaries. So a reminder, MMSD boundaries span all the way to Fitchburg, Verona, Sun Prairie School District is part of the city of Madison boundaries. So tonight we're going to really spend a little time better understanding our district boundaries and the complexities. If you go to the next slide, please, Jesse. In addition to the city of Madison having a goal by 2030 to create 15,000 new housing units, you've heard Dr. Gothard mention this before, myself and probably other city leaders, that the city of Madison specifically is supposed to grow by 100,000 people by 2050. What you see on the screen here is a set of visuals that show the state of Wisconsin going all the way back to 2010. You can see the darker green shows the higher population growth. The lighter green shows a decrease in population growth. If you look all the way over to the left, that shows the state of Wisconsin and the population change from 2010 to 2020. We are looking pretty good. You're seeing a lot of growth happening across the entire state. As you continue to go over all the way to the right, you will notice that the green gets lighter, meaning that the population across the state of Wisconsin is decreasing. You might have heard that there's only a few places in the state of Wisconsin where population is growing. That is Dane County, which is down in the kind of bottom center, and the La Crosse area. Outside of that, the state of Wisconsin is looking at population decline by 2050. With the exception of the city of Madison and the Dane County area, that is expected to grow by over 100,000 people. So if we know that we are growing in the city of Madison, we know that that means potential impacts on our schools and positive impacts on our schools. And so the work that we are starting to do around the boundary review is really helping us ensure that we will be able to support the students and families that are coming to the Madison area. So it's an exciting thing to see that while other populations are declining, we are growing. Next slide, please, Jesse. And so what will our Building for the Future plan include? It is focused on assessing our current school attendance areas and our district boundaries. A reminder that we own 2 plots of land currently, one on the far west side where a lot of developments are happening, and one on the far east side, Acacia Ridge and Sprecher Road. Part of this work will help us determine what to do with those 2 plots of land. We're gonna evaluate our current programming and our current options, and we really want to continue to hear from our families, current families and future families, what they value most for their child's educational experience. We'll share some of those results tonight. Next slide, please. So what is a boundary review? Part of the Building for the Future, we've talked a lot about it. It's data-driven. We're in the process of collecting data right now. We're looking at enrollment data, we're looking at school capacities, we're looking at developments in the next 5 to 10 years, forecasting data, compiling all of that data. The boundary review is transparent, ensuring that we're continuously providing updates to our community, to our families, and to the Board of Education. It's collaborative, ongoing input from community stakeholders. It's iterative, and you'll see on the timeline slide that I show you next how iterative the process is. And it's informative, ensuring that the public understands our problem statements, what our goals are, and what the potential outcomes are. Next slide, please. So here's a timeline. As I mentioned, this is our first formal update. Tonight is really going to be information sharing. We started this work back in July. The Board of Education approved a 2-year contract back in June. We're really in the just beginning the initiations phase. We just ended a data collection. We've done a project kickoff. We're really now in this preparation phase where MGT is doing a lot of the data work. They'll talk a little bit about what the future of that looks like. And then in that light green area, I want to draw your attention there. That is where we will spend approximately a year going through iterations of scenario planning, community input, community feedback, refining our scenarios along the way based on what we're hearing from the community, before we come to the Board of Education with a final set of recommendations, approximately February of 2027. So we really are trying to spend close to 2 years to do this work so that it's thoughtful, it's iterative, it has lots of opportunities for community input before we bring our recommendations to the Board of Education. Next slide, please. So I'm going to do a transition here for a minute. McKay and Marcy from MGT are online with us. They are our partners with this work. We're gonna have McKay just share her screen because it's gonna be easier for her and Marcy to toggle their slides. You still have the slides in front of you. And before McKay shares her screen, if Marcy and McKay, you could just do a quick introduction of yourself so that the Board of Education and our community knows who's online with us.
Great. Thank you so much, Board President Nichols, board members and Superintendent Gothard. Thank you, Cindy, for the introduction. My name is McKay Larrabee. Excited to talk you through the beginning of this process tonight.
Hi, everyone. I'm Marcy Horner, and I'm also excited to be here. Thanks for allowing us to spend some time with you tonight to share this information with you.
Right, and McKay, let me know if you can share your screen. Perfect.
Yes, can everyone see that?
We can.
Okay.
All right, I'll turn it over to you. Thank you.
Great, wonderful. So a little bit about MGT. We are a nationwide K-12 firm that specializes in demographic analysis with over 100 years of experience, over 150 boundary reviews and redistricting projects throughout the United States, over 1,000 student forecasts and reports, and over 300 master planning projects. This is the agenda that we just kind of put out there, but we want to go through the community survey results and talk about guiding principles, and then spend some time talking about your current boundary complexities, which you have a lot, and then talk briefly about what to expect next. So the results of the community survey that was open from August 29th to September 26th of this year, we had 2,790 respondents and 721 open-ended comments. So a lot of information to start off this project with. We've got a lot of those respondents were by and large parents and guardians, followed by district employees, and then community members, others, and students. One important piece is that on special programming, we did have a larger response rate from families that identified with an advanced learner in their household. And we also had the highest percent school response rates were from West High and Hamilton Middle, then down from there. However, we had good response rates from all throughout the district. So 2.5% on average from all of the schools. When we asked about all the things that are important for this process going forward, we got a lot of open-ended answers. They mainly fall into each of these categories, and you'll notice as we go through and we start talking about guiding principles that there's a lot of these pieces that are reflected in the guiding principles. One thing that we did find is when we asked respondents if they were aware that the district is conducting an attendance boundary review study, we only found that 43% of respondents were aware of the study, with the highest awareness amongst district employees and the lowest awareness amongst parents and guardians. And so this is, it's really important because we'd like to see this awareness up in the 70th percentile. And so we do have a lot of room to grow in this area, but you have a very long runway. So we have a couple of years, a lot more awareness is going to happen over the next 2 years. I would assume that awareness would really peak next year when we start talking about boundary scenarios. So a district has a lot of levers that they can pull, a lot of approaches to balancing student population. Two of those that are related but not necessarily included in a boundary review are programming. So if you move a program from one school to another, that's a way to balance or change the enrollment at those schools. And then also by policy, allowing boundary exceptions at certain schools that might be over capacity. That's another piece that you can use to really constrain or open up enrollment at schools by using policy. For this process, though, we're focusing on boundary reviews. And for boundaries, they're innately residence-based. And so your tools for this is to create different boundary scenarios, different boundary models, and then also incorporate student forecasts into those boundary models so that you can look at what populations look like now, as well as what they might look like in the 5 and 10-year horizons so that you can make really good data-driven decisions. Now, the decision criteria that you're going to use in order to come up with these boundary scenarios is what we call the guiding principles. Guiding principles are a set of core values. So when we ask the community about what's important to them, In this process, these were their top responses with quality of schools and teachers, overall school safety at the very top. And then also the three in red that are highlighted here, quality and variety of programs, clubs, and after-school opportunities. Now, while these are really important to community, they are not inherently tied to boundary scenarios. So we look at the items highlighted in green and how they might relate to guiding principles. Things like small class size tie into utilization. If you have building utilization that's balanced across the district, then you're going to be looking at better class size. Creating and maintaining neighborhood schools, that's directly related to boundaries. So these are the pieces that we are looking at when we're developing guiding principles. So what are they? What are guiding principles? So they are, they kind of fall into these three buckets. So they are guide to boundary scenarios. So they're an idea of what works, and more importantly, in a lot of cases, what doesn't work. If you know what doesn't work, then that's gonna take you a lot further. They give context to the decisions that are being made, and so community is following along with the decision matrix and how those boundaries are being modeled and how they are being determined. And then they're also a rule book for consensus. We find that committees tend to hold on to one guiding principle and another committee member might hold on to another guiding principle. There's a big push and pull between these guiding principles, and that's the importance of bringing folks together into a solution that works for all students. These are some examples of kind of the buckets that guiding principles fall into. Streamlining transportation, minimizing impact, balancing demographics, keeping neighborhood schools and transportation costs low, and balancing utilization. Again, they conflict with one another kind of on purpose because that's a big part of the decision making is the push and pull of which boundaries work in what ways. They drive the consensus, and they should not, this is very important, they shouldn't be ranked because one is not more important than another. They're all meant to serve all students. And then they also help to identify unintended consequences. Again, what doesn't work. Here's an example of that complexity. When we're talking about, if we're looking at the guiding principle of balancing utilization. So the benefits would be to a result in balanced class sizes across all of your schools, equitable access to specials like PE or library, and then the fiscal benefits of having a well-staffed, well-utilized school. However, the challenges might be that you might have imbalanced socioeconomic factors. You might have students traveling further distances than what their closest school is, and you could increase your transportation costs. You could also increase the impact to students. So each of these, I recommend that you look at the other two examples, but there's a lot of push and pull between each of these guiding principles. If we go back to the results of the community surveys, we can see how each of these core values responds to directly towards a guiding principle. So for example, I went through the small class size and how that can fall into the guiding principle of balanced utilization. Creating and maintaining neighborhood schools, that's directly related to guiding principle associated with transportation and neighborhood schools. Balancing enrollment at overcrowded or underutilized schools feeds into the utilization guiding principle. Attending your same school that you've attended, that is a minimized impact guiding principle. And balance of school enrollment by family income that relates directly to demographics balancing within the district. And so each of these has a bit of relation to the development of these guiding principles. So these are the draft guiding principles for the process. They fall into those categories. So utilization, where we're considering capacities and growth trends across the district. Demographics, taking that district-wide perspective by considering demographics throughout the district. Transportation and neighborhood schools, maximizing proximity and minimizing distance to a school. Minimizing impact, so minimizing the number of students that are impacted by boundary adjustment. And then programming, considering boundary impacts to special programming. These are all fall into your draft guiding principles to help us as we start looking at scenarios. And with that, I know I've thrown a lot of information towards you. So I do want to take a brief pause to answer any questions that you might have before we go into looking at your current boundary complexities.
So President Nichols, we thought it would be great to see if there's any clarifying questions or anything from the board here before we actually get into our interactive map on our current boundaries.
Okay, Board Member Muldrow, and then sorry, y'all on Zoom, I will catch up here. This is up. I see you, Blair.
Thank you, Chair Nichols. I am curious about how this review engages with kind of the segregated reality of a city like Madison. And so you have a city that has a certain level of economic segregation that then has real racialized consequences. And you're trying to make sure that students have, you know, robust educational opportunities, but you also need to navigate the specific needs of communities of color, particularly our English language learners and our immigrant populations. How are we factoring that sort of phenomena into this work?
And so do you want me to take a stab at that with the guiding principles? Okay, great. Thank you for your question. It's a very good question, and it is it goes to boundaries being innately residence-based, right? And so while we can't equalize where students live and the socioeconomic pieces that go into that, what we can do is look at the other pieces that are impacting students with those boundaries. So the portion of your guiding principles that deal directly with the demographics is oftentimes where we are looking at boundaries. Some of your boundaries are already kind of looking at trying to balance out demographics. When we're looking at different scenarios, we're often looking at did we move a planning area or a study area that had an unintended consequence? Did we push the numbers in the wrong direction, or did we push the numbers in the right direction? But when it comes to boundaries, we are still focused on where students live and serving them at their nearest school. And so that's, I think, where it comes into play in the guiding principles, is the guiding principle located under the category of demographics, trying to keep our eye on if we're creating these unintended consequences and doing our best to make sure that all students are served.
I appreciate you speaking to that question, although I found your answer to be a bit obscure in terms of kind of the material reality of what it means to resource young people's educations in a way that's specific to the needs of the students. I guess my only follow-up in relationship to this question is, we've done some real work over the course of the last half a decade to address some phenomena that were really pronounced as inequitable, like groups of kids of color being the most likely to have to travel the furthest to their school, spending the most time on the bus at really early hours of the day. And I guess I want to ensure that those kind of strategic efforts to make our school system more equitable are being factored in really, really thoughtfully.
Yeah.
And
Go ahead.
sorry. I just want to say I appreciate that. And part of this work is looking at not only students where they reside, but also their demographics. And so when we're looking at culminating those, summing them up into where they are living, it does come into play directly with, you know, is a program placed correctly, or does a program that might be a DLI program need to move and serve a population that might be a higher concentration of a Spanish speaker or a different language speaker. So those pieces are inherently in our modeling, because we want to look at where the student is living, and if they're transported to a school that's further away, that's not serving them as much as if we could place a program closer to their home.
Yeah, I think historically, a lot of this work, and I think you used a term earlier in your answer that was like balancing demographics. And it's hard for me not to interpret that, given the era that I grew up in, as kind of spreading out kids who live in poverty and kids of color. And so I do hope that we take a real comparison to how we approach our most affluent children in terms of how we're making these decisions. Thank you so much for speaking to my question. I'll turn it back over to you.
Thanks. Let's go with board member Mosner Feltham, and then we'll come to board member Saravo next.
Thank you. Thanks, team. Sorry I'm not with you tonight. Not feeling so hot. I'm a little confused. I'm confused, and for the people from MGT, like last week we had a work group meeting around our instruction, and we had a consulting firm come in and talk about the work that they had done, where they took themes from our from the work that they had done in our community and boiled them down. And a week ago, I felt that the boiled down version actually like lost its Madison-ness when we got there, right? Like what they gathered sounded like Madison, but when it got boiled down, it didn't, to me. So I'm confused and a little concerned when I look at the community survey highlights and I see that like the two things that were the most important to our community are not part of these guiding principles. So, and I'm especially concerned because one of them, the quality and variety of programs, clubs, and after-school opportunities, like literally has the word programming in it, which becomes one of the guiding principles. So I'm confused about why. I'm confused about why and how that happened, and a little bit apprehensive about it. So what I'm hoping you can do is set me at ease by explaining it to me again, or maybe a little bit more in detail, why those ones don't count, and yeah, how that goes.
Yes, thank you for that question, and I apologize for any confusion. I should have probably been a little bit more descriptive about the point was to not say they don't matter, because they do, and it is very important that community is answering that quality of schools and teachers and overall safety, as well as quality and variety of programs, are really high on the list. What I am trying to say with guiding principles, if we go back to the toggles that we have, when we're looking at how to balance student populations, right? We're looking at well-utilized schools. For boundary review, you're looking at things that are related directly to boundaries, which inherently is where a student lives. Where a student lives does not necessarily have a direct correlation to the quality of the school or the quality of the program at that school. Now, if you look at different scenarios and boundary scenarios, that will modify because you're looking at different student populations or different configurations of student populations. But making a new boundary or changing a boundary doesn't necessarily change the quality of the schools within your district. And so that's what I was meaning to say, is that guiding principles are meant to be a decision criteria that help guide boundary placement or what the boundary configuration looks like. Whereas things like programming and your policy are things that help to determine, those higher core values that the community has. So it's not to disregard them. It's just saying that there's not a direct relation to a boundary scenario from those three highlights. We also want to have a survey that said, what do you find important in your community, and list things that were only boundary related, because so much of your school district and families and guardians within your school district think that safety is the most important, think that quality of schools is the most important, as well as I do as a parent. But I also recognize that my decision criteria for modifying boundaries is not necessarily going to have a direct relation to the quality of schools or the programming at those institutions.
Can
Does
I
that
add-
help clarify?
That's really helpful. Thank you.
Can I just add one thing, Board Member Feltham? I think the other thing that maybe doesn't show up here is that this work is really going to be in phases, and this first phase of the work is really about understanding our attendance areas, understanding where we have overcapacity, undercapacity, where we
I see.
need to make some adjustments based on just actual growth and actual students and families. The second phase, I would say, is really then thinking about the types of programs that we want to offer, that we either have here or want to add here for what our families are desiring. So that also, I think, is a way to think about it. Those guiding principles are really gonna help us make decisions as it relates to the potential implications of attendance area changes and the 2 plots of land. And then the programming piece, I think, is phase 2, where some of the components that the survey raised that are high may not show up in this first phase as we think about just how do we better balance and better create efficiencies, as Board Member Muldrow said, around ensuring we're very thoughtful about who might need transportation and who is impacted by it. So I just wanted to add that because I think that that's something that maybe doesn't show up in our slides tonight, but having the board and the community understand the multiple phases of this work.
Board Member Moser Feltham, if I could just add one piece, because I want to make a connection to you stating something to the effect of last week's meeting and RTI being here. I think those elements that are highlighted in red very much speak to feedback that we heard during the strategic plan. So I do feel as though our focus areas will address those.
Thanks. That's a good point. I appreciate you bringing that up. Thank you all for that clarification. Can you then talk a little bit more about the guiding principle around programming? I know that the scenarios are later, but just like sort of like what might we be thinking about around that guiding principle might help illustrate it for me a little bit.
Yeah, I think that so we are kind of getting into talking about just like Cindy had stated, we start off with kind of this residence-based, right? Because boundaries are residence-based, but we are also looking at populations and density of populations in certain areas with certain demographics. And so we're talking now about our first take on your student populations is to look at where students are living and where they are attending school. So we analyze that piece, and you can see when we get into, we call it an attendance matrix, when we get down the line and we share that with you, it really pops out that, you know, certain schools have certain programming. Certain schools might be serving 4K students or serving DLI students. Are those programs situated and spatially related to where the students that they're serving actually live? I worked with a school district that had a special program, and not one student that lived in that attendance area went to that program. It really uncovers a lot of those pieces, and so that we could properly place those programs if they do need to move to serve the populations that want to attend those programs.
Thank you. This has all been really helpful for me in understanding, and I appreciate you all answering my questions.
Board Member Sarabo?
Thank you, President Jones. I guess what I was kind of more focused on is when I'm looking at like where or who's taking the survey. Like where's the overrepresentation and the underrepresentation, and where are the voices that are very much underrepresented, or how do we address that? Looking at it as it is right now. Because when I'm going through the rest of the pieces that we get out of that, like supporting a lot of families who have special education needs, and I guess I can see like where it could be kind of built into there from here, but at the very top when we only heard from 16% of that population, if I'm reading that correctly. And there's 84% we didn't hear from. Or even the racial component of there, 78% of them were white as well. Like, these are really, those are big numbers. So is there like, are we acknowledging that and doing something with that, or what happens when you have that kind of awareness now?
McKay, you wanna go first or you want me to go first?
Yeah, sure. I can lean into what we see in other school districts, and we do see strength of voice is always something that districts will struggle with, right? Especially in a boundary review. And it is really important that we have leadership that is in committee that is centered around using these guiding principles to make good decisions for all students, not just for certain voices. I will say that the awareness was low overall throughout the district. And so we do have a really long runway, and that's something that a lot of districts don't have. And so you do have a really long runway with a lot of touch points to community, a lot of engagement that needs to happen, especially when we get into to showing boundary scenarios. And especially when people are going to be affected. We're working with a really large school district right now, and it's been a real struggle to make sure that everybody is aware. But I think we use visualizations and get them out to community as soon as we have them, and then that will allow us to target some spatial geographies so that we can really focus on schools that might need more information, more awareness, and really target the community engagement for those communities that might be affected more so than communities that might not be as affected.
Yeah, the only thing I would add to that is, while this is pretty similar to other surveys that we put out in terms of the responder rates, and we tried to push it out. One of the reasons why we built a whole year worth of community engagement is to ensure that when it comes down to having the conversations about what we learn from the data, that we are very intentional in terms of ensuring we're hearing from all the voices, especially voices that might be impacted by the scenario plan. So, yeah, I mean, it's acknowledged that the response rates are low, and we have our work cut out for us for the next year to do really intentional community engagement.
So does that mean, like, over the last year, this was inviting people into a space to talk about this specifically, as opposed to like working in collaboration with an organization that already reaches some of the population that is not represented in here? Do you know what I mean?
No, can you say your question again?
So having boundary reviews that you're inviting people into the space just for that specific purposes, as opposed to partnering with a community organization that already connects with a specific population that is showing up in here that is underrepresented. I don't think.
Like engagement strategy.
Yeah,
like,
we're gonna have to
what's-
be targeted in our approach, so
Yeah.
we're gonna have to look for both inviting folks into us, but we're gonna have to go out too.
Yeah.
Oh,
Mhm,
yeah, yeah, out to the community, out to people's spaces.
Yeah.
Out to them, yes. It's neighborhood centers, community centers, yes.
So,
And remember, so this work
Yeah.
the work just launched. I mean, the initial part of the survey was our first component. And so, again, the reason why we wanna do 2 years worth of this work is to ensure that we have the community engagement done right.
so I'm gonna be really intentional about this specific, our students with IEPs population.
Mhm.
Because sometimes reaching them is more difficult because of all the busyness that goes into some of the support that goes on with parents, you know, for the kids that are there. I know that, very, very much so, that more things that show up for me to take another thing. Like, obviously, I want to participate as many things as I want to, or as I can. But also, it's a lot. I would almost suggest maybe incorporating it into offering it to a parent aside if they have an IEP, if there's a case manager thing involved, and something that's more direct. I'm really concerned about that really low response from them. And how do you do it in a way that's just not giving them another thing to fill out? When they already have all these meetings, not only with school, but sometimes medical, sometimes going to other appointments. There's already a lot thrown at those guys already. And maybe part of the reason why there's such little response from there too, because also finding a community organization that is them on a daily basis, that also might be difficult because they're spread all over the place and it's so intersectional that could just be a really difficult thing. So I would hope that there's gonna be some like really intentionality of trying to hear from those guys specifically. And I look forward to see how, I don't really know like what we're gonna do going forward. Just that always makes me concerned because it's such a big population. And voices about the voice that we don't hear. Why?
Thank you. We good to-
Well, I do have
Oh, sorry.
one thing I wanted to also clarify. So I echo board member Saravo's kind of concerns about who did respond and then who didn't, especially if that's leading to the guiding principles. So there's one thing I do want to clarify. So when I look at the survey responses, there was a lower number of responses around reducing time spent on bus. But there's also higher number of responses around ability of the child to safely walk to and from school. And then higher even yet was proximity and nearness to your home and walkability. So I could see how issues related to transportation, having walking schools, schools in your neighborhood that you can walk to, and that those options be safe, kind of be collapsed into one guiding principle. And so when I'm looking at the guiding principle of transportation / neighborhood schools, what I don't see as clearly in that guiding principle description is talking about time on bus. I do see maintaining neighborhood schools, I see the proximity to home and walkability, and I see the safety components of that, like not crossing a busy street or avoiding railroad tracks in the parentheses. But I do think, for me anyway, one of the decision criteria that's unique to neighborhood schools is also transportation. So if transportation isn't going to be its own guiding principle, I do think it has to be described more fully in the description of the guiding principle. It doesn't.
And so I'll start and then McKay, you wanna chime in. So you're kind of spot on in terms of what you identified. We originally had transportation and neighborhood schools as two separate guiding principles.
Okay.
And then there's so much commonalities between the two. Less time on a bus is closer to having a neighborhood school, more walkability, and so we combined those two. And I think what I'm hearing from you is we just have to redefine that definition because we kept the and I'm looking at McKay shaking her, we kept the definition that was probably more closely aligned to neighborhood schools. And I think when doing that, we lost a little of the essence of the transportation components around the time limited on a bus, efficiency, some of those pieces. McKay, would you agree with that?
I would agree with that. And I think that might have been an oversight on my part. I believe it had an minimized time on a bus, spent on a bus. But I also think that it is also fine to pull those apart. It's important that, we kind of put guiding principles in 5 general categories, but that's just to kind of maintain a really clear decision framework. 6 is just as good, right? Because it's just that they are so related to have transportation and neighborhood schools. So we could either parse those out as 2 different guiding principles, one for transportation, one for neighborhood schools, or we can combine them with more information on and limit time spent on a bus. Because I do agree with you, that is not being spoken to in these guiding principles.
Okay, thank you for that. And then just to follow up, I think on the point that board member Saravo and board member Muldrow made around making sure that we really do, I'm good, they didn't say it this way, I'm gonna say it this way, that like we have a commitment to bring an equity lens to this work. And so would the guiding principles be different if there were more folks of color, folks who lived in different neighborhoods, folks that have kiddos with IEPs? Like, would the guiding principles could they be different if we had more responses from folks who didn't respond or who are still in the unaware zone? Or are these generally the kind of guiding principles that most districts kind of use in a boundary review, and we wouldn't see a lot of deviation or fluctuation from these? I'm just curious.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And I will say that running a lot of boundary reviews over my years, they are very similar. And I worked in Philly School District, Camden. There's a lot of different communities that I've worked in, and they are these core values are all inherently very similar, depending, regardless of what community you're serving. I will say that would they be different with different voices? Perhaps. I can't say that it wouldn't be that way. I think that these core values kind of cover every family wants a school that they can go to and feel safe at and get to quickly and fast and have a good class size and be served well, right? I think that is the basics of every family wants that. And these guiding principles try and strive to get as close to that serving all students as possible. So while we're talking about, we have demographics in one bubble, that's not unrelated to time spent on a bus, right? Like transportation, minimizing that transportation is an important piece regardless of demographics. Utilization, nobody really wants their student who might be not serviced as well at an overutilized building, right? We want to get those buildings so that they are utilized well, serviced well, as well as underutilized. If you have buildings that are underutilized, that creates more problems with not having as many services and not having as much programming as an overutilized school. So I think that it all tends to play into one another. I will say that I do think that these guiding principles usually fall into these categories and usually have some form of the language that we're seeing here. I will say that for Madison Metro, the programming piece is one that was added on for your district in particular. It's not something that we generally work with very closely with boundaries, but you have a lot of programs and a lot of movement of students to go to different programs. And so we wanted to capture that in the guiding principles so that they stayed high on the decision matrix, that programming piece. So that is the one that I would say was a bit of an outlier from what we've run with a lot of other school districts. But in general, it is, we see these very similar pieces. Minimize impact. You can minimize impact, you can stay with your current boundaries, but you might still be having the same issues that you have in the 5 and in the 10-year horizon, right? You can really go hard for that utilization and balance the utilization, but then you have to be okay with all the challenges that comes with potentially, miscalculating your programming or creating increased transportation costs. So these all are supposed to push and pull against one another so that they do serve all students.
Okay, thank you. My last question, and then board members, Rob, I see you. Once the guiding principles, are, kind of adopted and accepted as, yes, these will be the ways in which we make tough decisions. Do they ever shift or change as you gather more information along the way? Because what I heard Cindy say is that there will, and Dr. Gothard, there will continue to be more engagement and getting out there to folks, building more awareness, taking in more information. So if something else emerged, or if something emerged with more, a stronger response than maybe this initial survey initially suggested, do you ever go back and look at refining guiding principles, or do they kind of stay from the onset of the project?
In my experience with this framework, they generally stay. However, that's not saying that the process isn't flexible, because when we hear community voice and we start to reach more targeted audiences, that information on boundary refinements or boundary concepts of a different configuration will come through in these guiding principles. And so it's flexible enough to hear community impact. This is more of a decision criteria to push and pull and make the best data-driven decisions that the administration, the superintendent, the board can make. But the community feedback is going to be throughout, and that will fall into these categories most likely. If there's something that arises that we haven't seen before, it's not out of the question to add something to the guiding principles. If there's a decision criteria that we've missed for some reason, I don't see any problem with bringing in an additional guiding principle into the decision matrix if that's what's important for the community's core values.
I wanted just to add one thing, and then I just want to remind us that we have a second half of the presentation, and then time afterwards for questions. But part of the community engagement is to share the data that MGT puts together that shows the scenario planning around potential changes for attendance areas or adjustments, which then that iterative process will continue for a year. So the community engagement is about building awareness, but also being able to go out into the community to share the data in terms of what we learned, to hear from the community in terms of suggestions and where we might need to take those suggestions into consideration and or where we might need to make changes before coming to the board for a final set of recommendations around potential changes to attendance areas.
Mm-hmm.
Do you want to do the question, or do you want to do?
Let's just say, board members,
Okay.
Robert, do you have one more, not one more, but do you have a follow-up question related to this part of the presentation before we move on? Okay, yeah.
We'll do one more question and then Marcy will turn it to you.
Thank you, Board Member President Nichols. And actually, when you're talking about guiding principles, that's kind of where I was making my connections at, because in the demographics, they take the time to break down actually the groups that I was noticing that had the least amount of responses. And then in the programming, there's a whole bunch of like intentional pieces in there. I don't see in either of those places the students with IEPs are captured if we're going to be intentional about those other groups in that way. I don't see accessibility anywhere in there, and I don't see special education anywhere in either of those places. So if we're being intentional by pointing out these different groups in the guiding principles, if someone can tell me where they're captured intentionally like that, that's kind of where I'm making the two connections from.
I really appreciate that distinction, and it does come down to making sure that we are intentionally capturing those students. So we will add that on to both demographics and programming, those two pieces. I will say that while they're not listed on here, they are part of our data inputs that we are looking at when we are creating scenarios and looking at modeling. Those students are included in our analysis. So I want you to know that they are not underrepresented or unrepresented in the analysis that we're going to be looking at when creating boundary models. But we will add those into the guiding principles here, as well as the transportation piece.
I appreciate that. I just didn't know which one it would best fit into, but I thought that they would fit into either of those two particular ones, because that's where they have very intentional places of naming very specific programs and groups.
That's why these are drafts, so thank you all for that input.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, so we are going to actually start getting into our interactive map that shows our district boundaries and our individual attendance areas. Just a little framing before Marcy shows the screen is that this is really intended so the board understands our current state, the complexities that we have, and what that might mean for any potential scenario planning that we're going to do. We wanted to make sure just building information and awareness. So Marcy, I'll turn it over to you. You all have access to this on our Building for the Future website too, if you're ever interested in playing around with it.
Okay, I'm gonna make sure, oh, I don't think I finished sharing, I can't remember my name. Okay, are you able to see my screen or no?
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, perfect, okay, great. Okay, yes, absolutely, thank you so much. We are spending time right now wanting to show you this map so that you can understand the current boundaries of your district. That way, when it does come to boundary planning time, you understand some of the current challenges that the community faces and the complexity within your boundaries. For now, this is just a learning piece for you to use to become familiar with the boundaries. It is interactive, so I'm going to show you a little bit about how to use it, as well as point out some parts of your boundaries. The first thing I want to show you and point out is, what do we do when we see a map? We always look, at least I always look at my own home, what I'm familiar with. You do have a search bar here where you can search in an address. The other thing that you can do that will be helpful, I believe, because right now the base map is a light gray canvas. You can click on this button here to change your base map. This will allow you some different views. You can choose from any one of these. I'll show you a view with some more prominent street names. So you can zoom in to see, as you zoom in, you'll actually see a little bit better those areas, the streets. Another example would be showing and looking at it at a satellite level, where you can zoom into specific areas that way. So you're not stuck with just the gray canvas. I'm going to show it to you with that for now, excuse me, for now, because I want to try to hopefully be able to pop out some of the colors that are in the map. So a couple of things about how to navigate. Over here we have these layers. This map is basically like each of these different items are a layer on the map. So you can choose which layer you want to see. Right now, we're looking at the middle schools. We're looking at the boundary of the middle school, an outline, and we're also looking at elementary schools filled in with a unique color. So you can see that these round circles that are show a blue little schoolhouse, those are your middle schools. I'm going to turn those off. As you turn them off, they disappear. You can turn them on and they reappear. I'll turn those off again and show you the high schools. These have a green color in case you want to have the middle schools and high schools on at the same time. It might help you to see the differences. And then the elementary schools show up in some red color. So it becomes very busy when you look at all of the schools together, which allows you, this is a reason why you have the option to turn off the schools so that you can really hone in on what it is that you want to see. So for now, I'm going to turn them all off. So let's see. So I want to show you the middle school boundaries are on. The first thing that I want to just point out is the complexity of your district as a whole. If you look at the outline of the district in blue, you can see that the district is not fully continuous. You see this area in the southeast that's kind of a pinkish purple. And then if you zoom in, you'll see this light gray section. This light gray section is not a part of your district. This is a neighboring district. And as you zoom in, you see a little bit better where those streets are. So that's one complexity. And another is within your district, you have pockets that are also not part of your district. So your district is surrounding these other little pockets here. So this is an example of an area that is not a part of your district. Yet it's in the area where you have a lot of district boundary there. So that's something that we don't usually see to that extent. So that's a complexity of yours. The elementary schools, as I said right now, are a unique color to help you. I want to show you, I'm going to turn off this middle school outline. And I want to show you, I'm going to click on this yellow boundary right here. This is a pop-up comes out that explains that this is Shorewood Hills Elementary. There's this little square rectangle icon right here. If I click on it, it will dock this pop-up. So it'll put it in the corner and out of the way so that you can view better what you're looking at. You can see it is also highlighted. So you can see that this is an example of a boundary that is contiguous or continuous or one boundary. There are other boundaries. For example, and I can click right here. This will give me some elementary attendance area labels to help me identify. I'm going to click on this darker blue section here. You can see that it pops out with this highlighted blue. This is one attendance area for Stevens Elementary. I'll turn on Stevens Elementary, which will allow me and you to see where that school is located within this boundary. So essentially, all of these highlighted areas are assigned to Stevens Elementary. This is an example of a non-contiguous boundary and also what I would term an island zone, which would be a zone that is separated from a larger mass. And I'll show you another example of that.
Do you all understand that? Blue, it's one attendance area for Stevens.
Yeah, I'm getting that.
Okay.
You okay?
Lots of questions, like
Yeah.
how did we get here?
Yeah. Marcy, sorry, I was just making sure that board members that were in the room understood that all of the dark blue that you have highlighted is all Stevens attendance area that surrounds other schools and stuff. So I was just making sure they're following.
Absolutely, I appreciate it. Yes, thank you. Another important complexity that you have is you have a few attendance areas, such as the Franklin Elementary attendance area and the Randall Elementary attendance area, that are the exact same elementary attendance area. In this zone, you have Franklin, which is a K2 school, and then you have Randall, which is a 3-5 school, but the boundary makes up the K5 boundary. So that is why it's combined on the map, and you'll see two other examples of that in elementary, which is the Latham Marquette. And here you see the same in Midvale Elementary and Lincoln Elementary, which this is a non-contiguous boundary, with Midvale being the K2 and Lincoln being the 3-5. I also want to point out that you have optional areas. So I'm going to show you this area right here. This small little polygon here is an optional area. The students in this area can choose to go to either Crestwood Elementary School up here in the north or Stevens Elementary School, also in the north. This is also what we would call an island zone, a non-continuous zone, and the fact that it's optional creates a different complexity as well. Another example here, if I click on Chavez, is an example of an island zone where the main portion here is or the larger portion of Chavez, and then over here is an additional portion, which is what we would call an island zone.
Right in the back of the.
An additional complexity is you have this highlighted, all these little sections here that are now highlighted in bright blue. These are a part of an extension area. These are areas that are currently not part of the district, but will become a part of the district soon. Some extension areas where populated have a designated school assignment, but some do not, such as these that are highlighted. Okay, next I want to talk about feeder systems. A feeder system shows how students move from one school level to the next. For example, which elementary schools feed into which middle schools and which middle schools feed into which high schools. A clean feeder system ensures that students from the same neighborhood stay together as they advance through the school levels, and that school boundaries align smoothly between levels. A split feeder is where some of the elementary students go into one middle school and some go into another middle school. What we want to avoid is a small split where a single neighborhood is isolated into a different middle school than the rest of their cohort. I will just point out, let me clean up some so it's a little bit easier to see. I just want to also point out, this may be helpful, it may be not, but I tried to color, keep a kind of a same color ramp for elementary schools that feed into a middle school. It doesn't always work perfectly, but hopefully that helps you kind of train the eye a little bit. As you can see, this pinkish purple over here is one middle school. I'll highlight it to show you. The different colors in there are the schools that are assigned to Senate Middle School. The same over here for Hamilton Middle School. I do want to point out something particularly, okay, let me turn on here the middle school fill. You can see now that the middle schools now have a unique color. You can see that these colors are the same. This is one boundary, once again, a non-contiguous boundary. And I would really encourage you to get into this map. You're not going to break it. You can turn on and toggle on and off different attendance areas to really familiarize yourself, because there's some things that you might not really fully grasp without really getting into it. For example, if I'm looking at this area here, just this section right here. So this is one elementary school. Let me turn on, let me do this really quick. This right here is one elementary school, Hawthorne Elementary School. And if I am going to turn on the middle school outline to kind of show you what happens here when and again, I just want to look at this smaller portion in the south. This section here now becomes a part of Sherman Middle School without this main part. So it breaks off from this other main part of Hawthorne. It now becomes Sherman Middle School. And then as they turn on the high school, it feeds into this high school. So just getting in, turning these layers on and off, I think will be really, really beneficial. I'm going to show you the high school boundaries are outlined and filled. I'm going to show you, let me show you what it looks like when the middle school boundaries. So with these high school boundaries, you can see an example of a split feeder. If you look at this neighborhood right here, this section that is separated, you'll see what I'm talking about when I talk about split feeders. Now down here is not, I don't think it's populated, but this has some homes and population here. So these students have been together in their middle school and also have been together with a large cohort in their elementary years. But then, as you can see, moving into the high school section, they now become a part of, I believe this is West High School. So then this is a portion where a small cohort or a small group of kids are broken off from their larger cohort and go on to a school where they haven't been enrolled or lived in a resident area with the rest of their students, with the other students. And sometimes it's helpful to identify these by layering the outlines. If I layer the high school and the middle school, you can see this green area to be able to just maybe hone in on that area where the others are layered on upon one another. And then also you can do those layering exercises with all of them. And this is really just to help you to identify some of those areas that might be challenging to your community. You might not have heard any of the challenges. I can guarantee I've worked at a desk in an elementary school and received the phone calls that are saying, why is my child going to this middle school when they've gone to elementary school with all of these? So somebody likely in the district are getting questions and calls about some of these challenges that they're facing. So I would encourage you as we begin this process to become familiar with it so that as you as the process goes further and changes are made to attendance areas, you might understand why those changes why decisions were made to make certain changes to certain areas. Because simpler attendance areas are just better for communities. And I'm not sure, just a quick story, we worked with a district in Louisiana that after a year of working with them and a presentation was being made on very, very similar to this, and the board member said, so is this your recommendation for our new boundaries? Because they weren't familiar with what their boundaries were. And we just want to start at the very beginning and say, please become familiar with the boundaries in your district.
Thank you, Marcy. You done going through the
Yes.
for now?
Yeah.
Thank you so much. So just a couple of things that I want to reiterate, then I'll turn it over to President Nichols. So a reminder that you all have access to that interactive map, but it's on our Building for the Future website also to play around with. I think what was shown is that there's places where students and families have to drive past multiple schools to get to their school of attendance area. And as we go back to the initial conversation around community engagement and community sessions, these are some of the potential scenarios that may be put in front of families to get their feedback on, where we can make attendance area changes that are more efficient, create more neighborhood schools, the walkability, the transportation, as well as what it might mean for utilization and capacity. So those are just examples to show the complexities of the school district, attendance areas and boundaries that we have to work within. And then some of those might not be changed, right? But all of that is part of what we want to do over the next year after we do some data collection. So with that, I'll turn it back over to President Nichols and see what questions the board may have about the second half of the presentation.
Any questions on that section before we kind of close out this update with what to expect next? Yeah, Board Member Muldrow.
I really appreciate the orientation to our boundaries. I do think this board is really familiar with our attendance areas, in part because there's a large percentage of this board who attended Madison Public Schools. There's also a really significant portion of this board who sends our children to the school or has sent, you know, quite a few kids to this district. That being said, there are some real nuanced conversations to have. Our district, like all districts in the United States of America, has a history of segregation, and some of how our boundaries are configured currently is really about us as a board having awareness of that history. So when you look at why do we have Lincoln and Midvale, in terms of why do we have some schools that are K-5 and why do we have some schools that are split? Some of that was done in response to a lawsuit that said this school district had failed to desegregate schools. And so I think as we get into this conversation in terms of the long-term historical reality of how our boundaries have come to be, I think we need to really take into consideration, I guess, some of the practices we've embraced in relationship to our boundaries. And so I guess one of my questions is, as we're thinking about the growing community that is Madison and the two pieces of property that the district owns in terms of expanding the district, how do we factor in kind of the type of school and configuration of school? The other thing I think about is when you think about a school like Henderson that serves our entire city's hearing impaired population, and then kind of all of the schools that feed into that middle school, does it make sense for a school that is serving the entire community to be located more centrally? How does that get figured out? The other thing I want to speak to is in some like consideration of safety and consideration of best practice, what student populations we actually want to be going to school together. So do we want schools that are 6th grade through 12th grade where we have combined populations of middle school students and high school students? Do we want schools that are combined populations of middle school and high school? You know, and so on, and what are the implications of that across our system? So I am wondering if some of this review really allows for us to reconfigure our schools themselves and to embrace better practices in a more modernly recognizable configuration of our city. I'm sorry if that is too expansive a question to speak to.
No, I don't, McKay, you wanna start or you want me to start? I saw you came up with me.
No, go ahead.
Yeah, I don't think that's too expansive of a question, and I think that everything you said are considerations of what we're going to learn over the next year, starting with our 2 plots of land, and both in terms of the growth of what it means for what those attendance areas could be, or if the communities are indicating that those schools might be specialty schools, or if there's a way to reconfigure, reconsider the grade levels based on both utilization and capacity, and also what we hear from the community. So I think all of those at this moment in time are what we hope the next year will bring, and what we hope to learn to make decisions about what makes the most sense to move forward and where we want to make changes. Some of them are going to be more straightforward in terms of what we saw around attendance areas, but through that, I think we'll also hear what the community, what our families, current families, and hopefully future families. So I think it's an exciting time.
I really appreciate that. I do think that we have a conversation a lot about how convenient it should be to get your kid to school and what it means for young people to be able to attend school in their neighborhood, close to where they live. I think we also have to have a conversation about what it means to attract students from other districts. And so if our district surrounds another area, I have a lot of curiosity about how many kids in that little area that is surrounded by MMSD transfer into MMSD out of convenience or out of the desire to be a part of our programming and what makes us unique in comparison to other districts in the surrounding area. My real hope as we develop and expand our district in parallel with our community is that we are not surrendering students to the surrounding areas, but that we are really competing to make sure that our programming is not just serving the students who live closest to it, but is attracting students from other areas whose parents know it's worthwhile to send your kid to MMSD because what we offer is excellence.
Yes.
Waldro, I think to your point, 1999, the Sprecher neighborhood, the Far East neighborhood there had 2 different sites identified as schools. 2, not just one, not just the land we own by Door Creek Church off of Sprecher Road, but also up where North Star Park is now in Grandview Commons. Both of those had identified early on for the thousands of people who now live there that there would be a school in that area. And here we are 25 years later with nothing there. Part of our impetus for doing this work is to avoid ever having that happen again in MMSD in our growing city. And we, all the points that you just brought up are excellent ones. And there are things that I hope to learn too going through this process. It would be much easier if someone had all the best ideas right now and they just said, this is what we're going to do. But it's far more complex than that. We know that. There's resources. There's the reality that Wisconsin public schools are completely underfunded. So anything that we do from an operational standpoint, we have to make sure that we're not also creating other funding cliffs or funding challenges that we can't sustain. So we're trying to do this with as much parallel agenda as possible with everything that we're doing. That's why we're taking a comprehensive look. And that's why we're saying 2 years at minimum, if not more. That's just to have some recommendations, let alone to implement the recommendations as well.
I think that knowing that we're gonna do this really thoroughly and really thoughtfully is important to the greater community. I am excited to do this work, and I do think the timeline does matter because of what you just spoke to in terms of our ability to, I think if we talk about resources as a barrier to expansion, I think what we fail to recognize is the importance of enrollment in terms of being able to finance the district. And so I know we're gonna be juggling multiple priorities in this work, and I very much appreciate that we're doing it and that we're doing it really thoughtfully.
President Nichols, we have one last slide to talk about what to expect next. I apologize. I would like to go through it and then open it back up for questions. Is that okay?
Yep, that is fine. I know that we had dedicated about 75
Yep.
minutes for this update tonight, and we're just a little bit over, so just to make sure we are using good use of our time tonight.
Yep, we'll do the last slide and then we will be done. Marcy or McKay, do you want to share your screen again, or would you like me to share it?
Marcy, I can share, or either way.
Okay, yeah, that's great.
And then Marcy, do you want to just go through real quick what to expect next? We just didn't get a chance to, yep, perfect.
Yeah, absolutely. So now we're preparing for boundary work, and in doing that, we are mapping student locations, and we're finishing up and continuing to do our residential development research. That's really going to help us identify areas in the district that's going to be growing. During the next 5-10 years, we will be developing a population forecast by grade and by attendance area. We're going to prepare and share with you some really great maps, some utilization maps that's going to really identify and help us identify maybe some problem statements. We're going to prepare and visualize population and enrollment analysis. It's this attendance matrices that's really going to give you, like McKay had said earlier, and be able to identify the relationship between where students reside versus where they are enrolled. So that's what's next as we continue to prepare for the boundary work.
Thank you. And we come back to the Board of Education in March, and so we'll have some of that information and all those maps and data for you to explore. Thank you, Marcy. Thank you, McKay.
Thank you. I was gonna just close out this one thought before we segue into HR. One of the things I noticed as Marcy was toggling between all the different options on the map is there were several times, Marcy, where you mentioned or you used the word cohort, where a cohort of students who used to be at an elementary school together were in this zone of a map, and then when you go here, they went to a different middle school and then they come back. And it caught my ear only in that it made me wonder if there is a reference to that in the guiding principles. I know it didn't show up in the survey, but it does make me wonder. And again, it's not, I'm not suggesting that you have to do that, but I think if we're thinking about a core value or guiding principle, it might also include something around children who went to elementary school. I don't know if that was like the cohort leaning, but I heard that as you were showing ways that young people get split and then come back, and then some are going over here because they're in a small island. So it might be something to think about where you include language around that minimize impact description. Yeah, that caught my ear.
I think if you don't mind me just speaking to that piece, because that's your feeder pattern, and that does matter greatly, because folks that are families that are split off and then come back, that's really hard on especially these smaller areas where you just have one neighborhood that's pushed to a different middle school and then pushed to a different high school. That's a very large impact on those smaller communities. And so I see your point, and we can talk to Cindy, but I think it would be great to add in a feeder pattern piece to this where we're really looking at trying to not isolate community, trying to keep feeder patterns as clean as possible, or when we have the opportunity to clean those pieces up to make it more understandable for families and community.
Yeah, that might be something to test out as you keep going.
Yeah, maybe we just shore up our definition for impact. All right, Marcy and McKay, thank you both so much. We appreciate your time. Thank you.
Yes,
Thank you all.
Thank you both.
All right, next on our agenda is an update from Human Resources. Not sure if I'm turning it over to anybody or
I think Jennifer's ready to go.
Jennifer, all
Introduce your
right.
Oh, I'm
colleagues.
ready. Yes, I am ready to introduce Rachel Carabell and Bree Hellenbrand from M3. Rachel is our benefits manager. We have a health insurance RFP update as we're going through this process. So we wanted to bring that to the board this evening. So I will turn it over to Rachel.
Great, yep. Okay, good evening. Did you introduce Bree? She does. Oh, good. All right, sorry. Good evening, everybody. So we just have a brief update. Welcome to take any questions on the update, but if we could go to the next slide. Thank you. So this is the timeline for health insurance RFP. So it starts in October. So last month, staff here were busy preparing a census. A census is basically a list of everyone that is currently enrolled in our health plan, and it identifies how many people are eligible and what some demographic information is about all of our current enrollments. The M3 began today, I believe, reaching out to current bidders. Yes, out. And then those bids, anyone that agrees to submit a bid, those bids are going to be due on December 15th. Our plan is for M3 to share with us, the district, in early January, the results of those RFP bids, and then bring them to this group in February. Our expectation is that the board would then make a decision by the end of March. And that's because we really need that kind of April 1st date if the district decides to move to a different carrier. We'll need time to work with the new carrier, share enrollment files, do education with employees to share about what the new options might be. Next slide, please. So here's some information about what was included in the RFP. So our current carriers will have the option to prepare or to participate in the RFP, or they could choose to just submit a renewal like they would any other year. All of the bids must include a bid based on our current plan design, but they could also submit alternative plan designs for our consideration. M3 will be asking for a 3-year rate guarantee as part of all of the bids. The carriers will be asked. We'll see if they actually provide guarantees. And then the second to last bullet point there talks about some of the things that will be reviewed as part of the RFP. So looking at their exposures, their qualifications, their network, their quality scores, what wellness offerings they have, and other kind of operational and service related requirements. Just a reminder, as part of our current agreement with courts, we do have an early termination penalty equal to about 4 months worth of premium if the district leaves courts prior to July 1st, 2027. So just a reminder that that is out there. Obviously, we can still go to RFP, but if as a result of that, we end up leaving them, that will be something we will have to deal with. Any questions on that? I don't know who's
What's the dollar amount
for the penalty?
for the 4-month penalty?
It's between $23 and $24 million.
Okay, so between 24 and $23 million, were we to move away from courts based on this RFP? My understanding is we were going to RFP specific to our other vendor, which is Dean. But are we going to RFP for all of our vendors or?
We're going for health insurance.
Okay.
So yes.
And when we've gone for health insurance in the past and we're looking at having multiple vendors, we've always had multiple vendors.
I think so for quite a while. It's been multiple.
We have had multiple vendors for quite a while because they're the most competitive price and plan wise with our location. So that's why it's made sense. The reason we've had Quartz and Dean is Quartz isn't able to take our entire population and Dean's not able to take our entire population. So when we canvass this, we send this out to everybody. We could potentially get a response from a national carrier that would include the UW providers as well as the SSM providers. And if they feel that, you know, they have the capacity to take on our entire group, obviously we will evaluate that to make sure that's the case and understand, you know, how many panels are open and do our due diligence through the RFP process. That's when it could be one carrier. If it was like an Anthem, that's where if we would make that decision and we would leave Quartz early to move to like a national carrier, get a competitive proposal with a national carrier, that's when we would have to go down the road with Quartz of having a conversation about that penalty.
Right, and in order for that to be a competitive bid, it would have to save, I would imagine, more than that $23 million penalty. Okay, for sure. The other question I want to ask is, are you expecting to see bids from Dean and Quartz?
So it's their decision if they want to respond to our RFP or if they simply want to release our renewal. And if they release our renewal, then that's when we have the negotiation power after we see what the market says. So if we would have an Anthem come back or if we would have GHC, you know, might put their hat in the ring again, or some of the other carriers that we went to, that could put some competitive pressure on our incumbent carriers, so both Quartz and Dean, where we could go back to them and see if they could improve that renewal, if say they release the renewal. If they don't want to release the renewal and they just respond to the RFP, they'll respond like everybody else.
This is my last question. Let's say in the long run that we go, we don't want to pay a $23 million penalty. We're really happy with our local vendors in a lot of ways, but in the long run, there is a significant savings and we have to take that into consideration. Would we be able to negotiate something that allowed for us to avoid the penalty and pursue a partnership with someone else who had a more competitive rate long-term based on this process?
That's exactly what I would do.
Okay,
Yep,
thank you.
That's exactly what would happen. We would have that conversation with Quartz. When I say conversation, it would be a negotiation to see what their thoughts are on it. Of
Okay.
letting us out of that, if, you know, penalty situation or out of that obligation, if we really do have a competitive proposal on the table. Quartz may want to do that. They're aware, I should just say to both, unless I said this already, I'm sorry. Both Quartz and Dean are aware that they're receiving this RFP request. As the incumbents, we did let them know ahead of time, ahead of today when that went out.
Thank you.
Let me just see. Okay, I'm gonna go to board member Saravo and then I see board member Mosner Feltham.
Thank you, President Nichols. I guess. I was just wondering, are there safeguards that we have in place for other lower income employees or ones that have higher healthcare needs when changes happen? In regards to what they have access to or cost and things like that?
So I think the way we address some of those issues that you raised has to do with the premium share, so the amount an employee pays per month out of their paycheck. So it depends on the job type you're in. So for example, our educational assistants and a couple of other categories of employees pay the lowest percentage of the premium at 2.5%. So they pay 2.5% of the premium. Our teachers and some other categories pay 6% of the premium. Our professionals pay 10%, and then our administrators pay 12%. So that's how we try and address the differences in people's ability to pay for the premium. The benefit design, once they're on the plan, is the same regardless of your income or your position. As far as, you know, other kinds of assistance during a transition, you know, we would be making sure that if we would switch carriers at all, of course, we would be, you know, reaching out to everybody to make sure that they understood what was happening and understood their choices if those choices changed.
That's a very now still absorbing some of it.
And part of board member Sarapo's question is some of that will come in through a proposal from a provider in terms of their plan design,
Yes.
right?
So
They don't necessarily recommend how we tier the premiums. That's a MMSD decision. But the providers will definitely say, here are all the things that you get by being in a health plan with us,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
So
And
you'll
many
be-
of those things are defined under either state law or federal law in terms of what's covered, but then the specifics of, for example, what you would pay out of pocket in like a copay or a deductible, they would have to bid on the current plan design we have, but they may offer other suggestions for our consideration. There are a few optional services that we do take advantage of right now. For example, there's an out-of-state dependent rider, so that there is some coverage if you have an out-of-state dependent. We have additional coverage for our retirees. We also have a limited infertility treatment benefit for. Right, so those are optional things that they offer, and we have taken. But otherwise, the plan design itself is consistent across all of the population that enrolls.
Okay. Great, thank you. You got,
Can I ask one follow-up?
sure.
And so, because I've not watched this with intention as much as now before, I mean, do you do like feedback after you establish this with a specific provider? Like, do you get continuous feedback from employees who are utilizing it to understand access and usability?
So we get feedback quite a bit. We get lots of questions. We hear from employees when they reach out. For example, one of our top questions or concerns that we hear is a lot of employees want to make sure that they're still going to be able to access GHC providers, for example. So we do receive a lot of feedback through our normal channels. And then HR itself has an opportunity for people to chat information to us about anything. So we do collect information that way, but it's all very ad hoc. We don't have like a formal survey methodology or anything, if that's what you're thinking.
That's not through like the Let's Talk feature. Is it something more intentional?
That I was thinking of the Let's Talk feature, yeah.
Well, thanks for leading that process. And I know board member Mosner Feltham has a question.
Thanks. I wanted to say first, thanks for your work on this, and I especially appreciate how you kept us really up to date on this process throughout. So I understand that we talked about curriculum timeline last week and how there's like an expiration date for curriculum, and I know that some of the large increases in premium came to us by surprise in the past handful of years. Do you have a sense for like what's the longevity of a contract, or is this particular, I guess, moment in the industry making that kind of impossible? Is my question making sense? Like how long, like we go to RFP, let's say we made a change, how long would we expect to stay with that change? How often should we expect to go through this process?
Would you like me to answer? Go ahead. Okay, yep, I think I'm going to answer and then please let me know if I'm on the right track. So, it's been a tough market. And yes, there have been some really large increases and we felt the pain that a lot of other private sector, public sector, just with what's going on in the market, starting at a medical trend of 8 to 9%. I know you've heard me talk about this before, really fueled by our high cost claims and a lot of specialty, pharmacy, very similar to other groups as well. So when the rule of thumb used to be that we would try to market or go to RFP every 3 years in order to not, saturate the market, if you will. Almost, if you're going to market too often and then you're never moving or making that change, you're not going to get as competitive of proposals, right, from the carriers. That was the rule of thumb. So we, for a number of years, we stuck with that. And, sometimes we would do a market check, but mostly, we stuck to that piece. And with Madison, I would just say with MMSD in the past, we didn't go down those rate cap roads like some of the mid-size or smaller districts. So when we first went through the rate cap situation, and that was, right before COVID and in 2020, and then we locked in, we knew exactly what the worst case scenario was. And so we were locked into those rate caps, we budgeted for those, and that's what it was. And that's why we waited until we were coming out of those rate caps to decide if we were gonna head into another RFP. We got forced to make a change, as we all know. I don't like bringing it up, it's not our favorite subject, but we had to make that jump, leave GHC and move to courts. And so, now as we're going through this process, the market will really tell us and help dictate what we do moving forward. So if we do get a great response, I hope we do, and we can lock in with rate caps that would make sense based on our budget, based on all of, obviously, your thoughts and your decisions, then we would be set up to at least know what's happening for the next 3 years. That's the luxury we had before. If the market responds and says, guess what? No, we're not giving rate caps, even if our incumbent carriers say that, then we might have to go to market more frequently than we want to. I hope that's answering your question. We are a little bit at the mercy of the market right now, and that's not, that's everybody. Please know that. You're a very large district, and that means something for sure. But given how the market has been operating and also what's happening at the federal level, there's so much uncertainty of what's going on with Medicare, with Medicaid. You're seeing all of us feeling that because the carrier, the health systems are tightening up and becoming more conservative. That flows right down to the health insurance carriers, which flows right down to all of us as an employer, and then all of the members feeling that. So that was a long answer, but hopefully that touched on your question.
It absolutely did.
Telling when we get the results, and we'll look forward to sharing those with you, because that'll help kind of steer us in a direction of where hopefully we can have some more long-term stability, but if not, we will work through that and figure out our best course.
Okay, thank you. That absolutely did help answer my question. My next question is about to what extent do we know what other like groups of municipal workers and their employers, like is the city doing something similar? Are other school districts also going to RFP at the same time? And I think the last time we talked about this, we were talking maybe about like a bunch of school districts in California that work together to do this. Am I totally making that up? I might be making it up. Please pardon me. I'm really not feeling 100%.
I don't remember.
But do we know if there are other groups in the city who are doing it at the same time, just from their open meetings?
Well, I can speak. I mean, I will just say Dane County goes through basically a 3-year process too. The Dane County is one of our clients. I will also speak for, you know, other surrounding districts. Yes, I mean, everybody is on their own kind of RFP timeline, but it's also dependent, and I hate coming back to it, on what the market response is. So we can't blanket and say, you know, back in the day, this was the practice. You know, you didn't want to go to RFP, you didn't want to do this every year. There are some districts who literally do this every year, and that's what they want to do every year. They're not as big as you. It's a larger undertaking when you are this large, but I do work with districts that is what they want to do every year, and we do that every year. But that's not always the norm.
And I will add, we know, Bree probably can't say this out loud, but we do know that Verona just switched this year. They previously had GHC and they just recently switched to Dean as part of a process there as well. And that would have gone into effect in July for them.
It did go into effect, and yep, they were with GHC for a number of years and came out of a longer term rate cap deal and now moved to Dean and have some rate cap stability. But
Thanks.
again, I always like to caution, all of this depends on your medical loss ratio and how your plan is running. Right? That's where you will see some business, I don't want to just say schools, you know, public sector businesses, larger groups will get some of these rate cap deals, but a lot of it is based on medical loss ratio and how you're running.
Thank you. I appreciate that additional context.
All right, Board Member Muldrow.
What's the total value of providing us insurance? Meaning we pay a really significant amount, so yeah, what is the total value we spend on health insurance a year?
Number 80 million comes to mind. Does that sound? Yeah, about 80 million. is what we
In
spend.
premium.
In premium, yeah.
Does that $80 million investment give us a certain amount of leverage in terms of negotiating caps or negotiating or attracting a variety of vendors? So I hear us, this is one of the rare conversations where I think we're talked about as a larger district, and it doesn't always feel like a great thing. It feels like it adds additional complexity. And that feels really complicated when you're investing close to $100 million. So it's hard to think like there's a lack of desire to work with an organization that's investing that amount in healthcare and has the kind of stability in terms of resources that MMSD does. Can you talk to us about that?
Yeah, and I'm going to, because Bree has already talked about our medical loss ratio, and that's really important to keep in mind here. So while we may be spending $80 million in premium, as long as we are running over 100%, our insurers are incurring claims of at least 80 million and actually more than that. So they're not collecting enough premium to cover what they're paying out. So they're still losing money on us, and that's why we don't have as much leverage as it seems like $80 million should buy us. So we will have more options once that is turned around and they're actually covering enough premium to cover the claims cost.
I think what's important to understand about what you just said, at least for me as a board member, is that there is absolutely no way we would maintain that $80 million investment per year, because what you're saying is our current insurers can't afford to insure us at that rate. And so no matter what, no matter who we go with, we're going to be investing more year after year in health insurance because of what it costs to insure the 6,000 people who work for us.
And because as Bree shared, medical costs, even if we make absolutely no changes, they rise usually faster than regular inflation. Now, COVID was an exception to that, but last year, on average, they rose about 8%. They're expected to increase about 8% again in 25 and projected for 26. So yes, even if everything stays the same,
I think you did a really great job of speaking to this, but I just wanna like reiterate that the current political climate and some of the direct dysregulation around like pharmaceutical drugs and things has a really obvious impact in this conversation. And so I really appreciate that you all are allowing us to talk about this in a way that takes into consideration factors that we don't necessarily have any control over.
And you're right, pharmaceutical costs are actually growing faster than that. Oh, yes.
Well, your question?
Yeah, I have one more, cause I was.
Yeah, go.
Okay, thank you for the I was thinking of last year, and actually Jennifer, I think you had shared with us that you had sent out more specific communication to employees that they were using their access to healthcare in a way that was instead of always having to go down to, it was more like education around it, usability of it, trying to keep the cost, keep the cost down. Do you know if what impact that had? Since that was, I don't remember when we last heard of it.
We try to have information be available to all of the staff so that they can see how, it's more about using like ER versus, and I think it's really hard to see the return on our communication efforts.
I was just wondering, since it was something that was presented, like it sounded like it was intentional, and did we see an did the intention have the intended impact on the people?
I think it would be a challenge, as Jennifer said, because the health plan data, trying to look at that and understand it. I mean, we don't have that data ourselves in order to do that evaluation. I think, if I recall, I wasn't here, but I believe we increased our ER copay maybe back in 2019. That sound familiar? And I think there was a lot of education at that time to do some more education to help people understand, well, you don't have to go to the ER for a lot of things. There are other options like urgent care. And now since COVID, we've got, telehealth, which is usually a much cheaper option. So that kind of education can help. I do think the drivers of costs for sure are pharmaceuticals, right? The hospital cost, the high-end services, the chronic diseases, things like that. But for sure, individuals and the district can benefit when people are not using the emergency room when they don't need to.
Thank you. It looks like you have a couple more slides related to the updates. So do you want to go cover those?
Yep.
All right, thank you.
So we wanted to let you know about some changes coming to long-term care insurance. So long-term care insurance, this is a benefit that the district has offered for quite some time. It goes to fund things like nursing home care or home-based care when an employee or their spouse can't take care of their own activities of daily living. So things like bathing, cleaning, washing. I'm sure I'm missing a couple other things there, but a lot of times it goes to pay for nursing home care, for example. But you can also get it to support, if you're in assisted living or you need in-person care. The most important thing to know about long-term care is it's not something that Medicare covers, and it is not something that your health insurance is going to cover. The district has had a great group-based or employer-based long-term care policy. Unfortunately, our life insurance, the company that provides that care, doesn't think that it's so great. So they have been looking for ways to get out of the block of business for some time. And so they are actually closing the plan to new enrollment effective February 1st. So this will not affect current employees. But anybody that wants to join this long-term care plan will need to get an application in before February 1st. It is subject to what we call medical underwriting, and so that means to apply, you have to answer some medical questions, and so you will need to be approved. But this is unfortunate, but it's consistent with some other actions they're taking, including the fact that they are increasing rates effective January 1st by 54%. So that is a significant increase. It's important to know that this is not a decision specific to MMSD. This is a decision they are making across their entire book of business across Wisconsin. They need regulator approval to do these kinds of things. So it's outside of our hands in terms of preventing them from doing this. We do have on the next slide, if you can go to that, Jesse. We're sharing what education we're doing with employees to make sure they are aware of this benefit. It is a great benefit. You can get yourself on it, your spouse on it, and once you're on it, you can even get your other family members on it. You can get your parents, your children, your in-laws. It is a great benefit, and it is nearly impossible to find anywhere else as a group benefit. The employees are 100% paid by, or the premiums are paid 100% by employees, so it's entirely voluntary. But there is a link in the slides to an FAQ that we've created. We have sent emails, we have included notices in our newsletter communication to employees, and we are sending an paper mailing to everybody's home address, including all of our eligible employees and all of our eligible retirees, letting them know that the window to sign up is closing. The only ones that don't have to pass medical underwriting to answer those questions are our new hires. They have 30 days to sign up. And at the new educator orientation this year, we made a big push to our new educators to make sure they were aware of this. I will be honest, it's really hard to get people to think about these issues. It's a tough benefit that people don't want to think about. But it is a great benefit because these costs are expensive and it's hard to get elsewhere. So, are there any questions on this?
No, it's a bummer. I think they're closing that down.
We all think that.
Yeah.
M3, we have this benefit too. I mean, it's impacting everybody. Not happy about it.
Well, thank you so much for bringing us up to speed on the RFP process. Oh, I'm sorry, Board Member Mosner Feltham, I just saw your hand.
You're fine. I don't have a question. I just, to get this news and to know that our state underfunds schools for our young people and that we don't have guaranteed care for elders. I feel disheartened and I'm trying to find a way to feel something else. And so I guess I'm just like cleaving to what I know about what we do in our schools, which is teach our children to value each other and to value their communities, so that hopefully this is not the situation for the long term, and that we have a different and better world going forward. I just wanted to put that out there because it's a bummer, but it's a bummer like that has people who benefit from it, and it's not ordinary people. And it doesn't have to be like this forever, even though it is like this now. And I just wanted to put that into the room because I know that we are all living through this political moment together. Thanks for listening.
Question, comment?
I think I've actually had to use the long-term coverage before. Like that was an experience. So I was thankful that it was there. Are there going to be is there alternatives that you're letting people know about in construction, like with this shift, or that people that they want that kind of coverage?
The challenge is right now, the market doesn't really offer an employer-based long-term care plan anymore. Sometimes you can get an individual policy. Usually though, it is tied to a life insurance plan. So they call it a long-term care rider that you can get with a life insurance plan that you buy. But those options are really individual plans, not group-based plans like this one. So, I mean, we'll look for other options, but like all of the information suggests that there's not a group-based plan available. Given.
There isn't a group-based plan available, unfortunately. But to Rachel's point, you know, there are definitely some alternatives, and we will research that and go down this road. We knew about the increase. We had no idea. We didn't have a lot of time, you know, really just let us know that they're pulling the plug on the benefits. So that's where our teams will be working together, and we will bring some options to the table when it's available. But to Rachel's point, the tough piece is it's really individualized. What's worked so well is to group purchase. So now with individual options, we have to weigh them and see what could possibly work still in a group setting.
Okay. One piece I would just add, which might, I don't know if it helps at all, but long-term care insurance really only started back in the 90s. So this is a fairly new type of insurance. And the insurers, it hasn't worked for them, and that's why they're walking away. It's unfortunate.
They didn't plan well for it. They didn't underwrite correctly for it. So the products have been underpriced. And we saw, you know, I don't think they planned well for the boomers. And it's awful to say. It's wonderful that people are living as long as they're living, but it's also putting a stress on, you know, these facilities, right? And so have to be able to pay for that. And the insurance carriers did not plan well for that. And so that's where you saw WEA had long-term care insurance, and when you saw other carriers, Unum is really the last one standing that has a group product. And so while it's not shocking, it's still disappointing that when we are getting our first increase in our state in a long time, then they just say, oh, no new enrollments and we're ending this. It just feels like kind of a double blow right now. So it is unfortunate, but we will continue to try to figure out some other alternatives or benefit offerings that might be able to provide some of these benefits if people, you know, if our members are interested.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah. I feel like we're always bringing really great news, so someday we will. Thank you for having us. Thank you for the snack. I'm gonna eat this on my way home.
You're welcome. All right, I think we're turning the corner now for food and nutrition.
Yeah, thank you.
All right.
Turn it over to Senior Executive Director of Services, Scott Chiak, and Josh Perkins is here to provide a food and nutrition update tonight.
Yeah, so I'll just kick us off briefly. We're going to give you a quick update about where we are so far in the fall. Some kind of refresher on the action plan to get Fund 50 kind of more neutralized. And we'll talk a little bit of exciting news about some of the new menu items, and how we've kind of reached out to the community for some work. With that, I did not provide meals this time. Josh will have that for the spring. We'll share some more new menu items tonight. We were last on the agenda, close to, so it's we don't want cool food. But Bob said we'll get it for the spring first time. You'll get food in the spring. So with that, I'll turn over to Josh Perkins.
Thanks, Scott, and thank you for giving me some time to catch up on what's going on with a couple of months under our belts in the operating year. Yes, we'll have some meals in the spring. Hopefully tonight's presentation will whet your appetite a little bit. Maybe bring us a taste station or something fun like that. So the first thing I want to talk about is how many more meals we're serving. This is something we want to do for lots of different reasons. A lot of our menu work and our work, I'm going to talk in a minute about our work with the playbook, which is a way of standardizing our service and trying to bring our students some consistency and some comfort. All of that is in service of serving as many meals as we can during the school day. We know that this is something that's strongly tied to students' ability to be in school, to fully pay attention and get what they came for. So this slide just breaks down what's happening. There's the first two bars here are breakfast. ADP is average daily participation, and this is across the entire district. So one thing I would point out about this slide is it's just gonna show you everything is leveled out in these bars, this graph. We do see big peaks and valleys depending on the school that we're talking about. And that can be contingent on things like whether the school is CEP. That's something I'll talk about a little bit on the next slide too. Actually, it's right here with Kennedy. So you see here, we've had a little jump in breakfast, average daily participation year over year, and a slightly more pronounced jump in how many more lunches we're serving. That equates to about 1% more breakfast and 2% more lunches. That's held steady over the first couple of months that we've been serving. They are distributed across a range, as I say here, of CEP and non-CEP schools. Again, so CEP schools, we have a new one in the group this year. Historically, and when I say that, I really mean for my own context, since I've been hired, we've had 16 and we added Kennedy this year to the group of CEP schools. Those are the schools which have no cost barrier or administrative barrier to students in accessing meals. All meals are free to students who attend those schools, and it's incumbent on us to make the meals appealing and accessible in those schools. Kennedy has shown, in contrast to this graph, to share a little bit stats from Kennedy. As soon as they opened up, they took about a 17% jump in breakfast and 27% jump in breakfast and 17% jump in lunch as a new school. Jesse, if you could go to the next slide, please. As I was saying, you know, whether it's in a CEP school that has a cost-free access to meals or one of the schools that still has the usual eligibility categories applicable, for all of those schools, we're striving not only to make menu improvements and make the food delicious, but also organize all the other factors that give students access to meals and encourage them to want to eat in the schools. So this first bullet point I'm going to talk about, I just referred to it. We've continued to partner with the schools, in particular the associate superintendent's team and the principal's team, to work on implementing the playbook. The playbook is a way of setting up service lines so that students know what to expect when they show up. There's good order when they show up in the service line, and probably most importantly, that as they go through the grade levels in their life cycle as a student, they know that is going to remain the same. We have some aspects of how we set up the service lines that help us make sure that students are being encouraged to eat fruits and vegetables. We all know that in the USDA meal pattern, that's our required component in our meals. So one specific aspect of that is we have the salad bars first in line. So that's the first thing a student gets to. Oftentimes that's, especially in the elementary grades, that has a number of choices. It's actually a higher number of choices of fresh fruits and vegetables than in entrees in those elementary setups. So we want to see them to see all that color, see, you know, get used to things like this is the first thing you're going to choose in your meal. We want you to feel good about what's showing up in the salad bar. I'll talk in a little bit about some new recipes, including the Chef Ann Capstone project. That's a key aspect of the playbook. But the rest of the playbook is intended to say across our schools, if a student comes to the lunch line, they know what to expect, and when they change schools, it's the same. They feel at ease, they feel comfortable. We have also redirected some labor to schools. And when I say redirected, that's actually a decent word for saying we've added some labor to schools. We knew we had some, we wanted to set up a second service point at Kennedy, newly joining the CEP roster. And we said, you know, we really want to push up participation and access to meals in this school. What's the best way to do that? Well, it turns out for that school, we really talked through it. The best way to do it was to set up a second place to serve breakfast, and that required a little bit of extra labor. There are some other CEP schools, large CEP schools, that have somewhat demanding infrastructure setups and heavy throughput needs, large enrollments, right? We want to continue to push up the number of students we're serving in those schools. And to do that, in some cases, it made sense for us, not only for Kennedy's CEP launch, but to sustain that meal growth and capitalize on their potential to grow meals, to add some labor, some part-time positions in those schools to say, well, maybe not for the whole day, but for this most intense part of the meal service, we want to have another staff member there to support that. And then I want to give some credit to she's actually a registered dietitian, but is also our marketer, doing a great job actively promoting new menu items a source of hard work over the summer, but also continuing hard work. We want to increase the appeal to all students and encourage the meals as an inclusive social occasion. That circles right back to the question of the playbook, wanting to set something up that's orderly and comfortable for students, but also continue to let them know, we've got new things coming up all the time, and I'll share more about that with you in a moment. Jesse, could you go to the next slide, please? I did want to talk about a little bit about how we've encountered we just got finished talking about some cost increases. What cost increases we're encountering. This is probably no surprise. We've all seen this in daily life at the grocery store. It's no different for us. The same commodity pricing and rises in the food market, which in some cases are pretty pronounced, have affected us too. They will continue to. We need to continue to do really careful menu planning to make sure we stay on an even trend with our fiscals in the department. So what this shows, there's been a couple of very pronounced increases year over year in beef and poultry. Beef is up about 21%, poultry's up almost 9%. This just shows for these three categories of foods, and I will make an analogy. Scott, chime in if you think this is a good one. Unprocessed foods, processed foods, and finished foods. So we might be talking about wheat, flour, and a muffin, right? In those three categories, they're all up. And then the last bar just shows you what the average year over year increase is when you blend them all together. So all in all, we've seen a notable increase in these foodstuffs, which feature prominently in our menus. They are basic, they are staples. And this is something we're going to have to really keep a close eye on in the rest of 2025, 26. Don't really know. We know the market always goes up, right? Food prices never fall, but they've risen precipitously year over year, and they may continue to do so. So we're going to have to keep a close eye on it. Next slide, Jesse. This is an early food service Fund 50 fiscal update through the end of September. So the initial trend is, you can see here, what we're looking at is actually a couple of years of history. So looking at the net income for Fund 50 in 24, 25, and 26. And you see that it's represented by slightly different graphics, but I think the thing I want to point out in this slide in particular is the similarity between fiscal 25, fiscal 26. We started to see this. So the good news about that is that in fiscal 25, we had a projected transfer from Fund 10 of 2.9 million, and the actual transfer as we closed last year was 2.7 million. It's 2.99 and 2.37 to be thorough about it. But we were able to outperform what we thought was going to be the Fund 10 transfer last year, and that trend is replicating itself this year. We're on a similar trend line. Again, we're going to have to keep a close eye on food costs. It's a huge factor that drives our revenues, and so that's one of the ones that's it's a constant source of, it's a lot of work over the summer to price those menus out carefully. And then things like food waste in the schools, making sure we produce conscientiously. That's an all year project. We don't set the prices once and then say we're good for the rest of the school year, but this is good news, I think, early on in the game. There have been a number of questions, certainly, I think, inside and outside the district, what's happening with funding. We've talked a little bit in all these presentations, I think, in some sense about what is happening with funding of food and nutrition programs. Ours is no exception. So I did want to share that DPI has stated funding is sufficient for our November meal claims. We just put in the October meal claims, so we know we have assurances that that funding is solid through at least another month, and we continue to watch this closely. I commend our partners at DPI. They're very good about staying in touch with us. They know we're thinking about this. They know we're trying to act in a timely way to make sure that those reimbursements are still flowing back into the district. Next slide, Jesse. Okay, getting into some more fun stuff. Tried to cover some of the money and some of the planning for the future of the year. This is from a recent event. Some of you may have been there. Did want to share it with you, Dr. Gothard. I know you were there. Said hello at the Centro Hispano event, Hispanic Heritage Month. This is myself and our intern, who unfortunately is leaving us soon. He was an intern funded through the Spark Innovation Grant, David Moskoff. He's done some great work for us. And we turned up that evening and served chilaquiles and a new dish, chicken and rice. So chilaquiles we wanted to serve because it's consonant with the theme of the event, but also because there's kind of a nice story behind it. A while ago, I went on to our district sponsored radio spot on La Movida, and we were kidding around with the host, and he wanted me to come up with chiles rellenos, and you cannot do that for 7,000 students, but chilaquiles I can do. So we developed that bean and cheese chilaquiles dish, the vegetarian choice, and then a newer dish, chipotle chicken and rice. That was it was really, we were sampling rather than serving a main meal portion as compliment to the food trucks that were at the event, but it was absolutely beautiful weather and we had a lovely time. Great, always great. You know, we spend a lot of time in the food production center where that's the infrastructure we need to serve this many meals, but it's great to get out on a smaller scale like this and see the community, talk to them. When we serve samples like this, I have to say it's always heartwarming to hear from members of the community. You know, we say, this is school food. This is something that's in our menus. And they're really, yes, it is. So that's the point of it, is we want to serve something to community members and not like, we're not just showing off, but we want you to know that your kids are going to see this on menus too. Jesse, next slide, please. Okay, these are some new things we're doing this fall. And then we're going to talk a little bit more about what's coming up. So we have had a great partnership. I will say the last three in particular, I want to call out. These stem from the huge reception we got to new vegetarian options in the last year or two. And in particular, tofu. That is something that I think we were honestly all surprised. It's a very flexible protein, as you all know. It's creditable within USDA programs, so it's very convenient. It's very versatile for us. But it turns out that, you know, we put it out there and we weren't sure what the reaction was going to be. And we had students who are not vegetarians asking for these dishes. So we said, yeah, nice. This obviously has student appeal. Let's keep going with this. So some of the things we've developed, and I think at different times, all of you may have tried some of these things, but not all. We developed the hot honey chicken thigh with smoky barbecue rice. And I know some of the folks in the room have tried that. The rice in particular is a great one. A butter chicken with cilantro lime rice. Again, a great dish that got that was one that was a surprise to me. I love this kind of food, but it turned out that students who I think may not even have known what butter chicken was or what tradition it came from really responded in a big way to it when we first served it. A burrito bowl with chicken or black beans, so that's that's one we made for to are or are not vegetarians. The garlic roasted tofu on golden rice, that's pictured up there in the upper left-hand side. And then the last couple of these, we've been using a really nice pea protein out of a Minnesota company we've been working with, and it's also extremely versatile. And those last two are dishes from there, the meatless marinara sauce, penne pasta right there, and then a plant-based, sloppy Joe sandwich, which has also gotten a really nice response. We started out with this company doing some taste testing at La Follette High School and got a huge response there. The students mainly said, sounds trite, sounds cliche, but I can't believe this isn't meat. It's not, right? So it takes on those flavors for us in a nice versatile way. You hit the next slide. And then some things we've got coming up. Thai beef or tofu. Again, we're kind of doing whether you're vegetarian or not over rice. Chicken pot pie, the weather is snapped cold, so we do want to keep serving some traditional favorites. Sesame noodles with chicken, and then I promised I would talk a little bit about the Chef Ann capstone. I'll be finishing my fellowship with the Chef Ann Foundation in January. Just got back from a very eye-opening visit to Boulder Valley last week, and we've got a couple of garden bar recipes coming up, which are curried roasted sweet potatoes we're serving this Friday, actually, and then Bang Bang cucumber salad. So Bang Bang sauce is a nice, mild, we changed it from mayonnaise to yogurt, very mild red chilies in there, because, we don't actually find out that a lot of elementary students are not only more tolerant of spicy flavors, but asking for them than people sometimes think. This one's not too overpowering, but those are things we're going to serve. We really wanted to develop a couple of new salad bar recipes. Again, we've served a lot of good fresh fruits and vegetable choices, but we want to show some of that culinary skill on the salad bar too, because we have put that first in the line. So wanting to move to some more composed salads. Next slide, please, Jesse. This slide is one Molly put together for us. As I said earlier, she communicates very actively with Jacobson, our cook, making scratch muffins very, very happily, as you can see. I wanted to just include this, so in case you haven't seen how we're promoting this to the district and the community, you'd know some of the channels we're doing that through. And I particularly wanted to plug, we've talked about this a lot in the last couple of weeks. It's not as straightforward as just saying, here are our social media pages, here are the links. That is fairly typical and straightforward, but we're really trying to spread the message that School Cafe, which is a program, it's a partner program to our main software for managing recipes and point of sale, how we bring meals through in the schools. Parents can and do sign up for that service to view menus, apply for meal benefits, and manage their student funds. But that's also the way that we can most actively and responsibly alert parents to menu changes. We know this is really important to parents. Sometimes menu changes do happen, and we want to make sure that nobody is taken off guard, especially people who may have decided to try the program for the first time and really want to know that if they made a choice that's meaningful to them, they get timely information about when that changes, if it does change. So that's a service they can sign up for. They get an email immediately. They get an email notification if there's a menu change right away. So we're promoting that to the community as a way to make sure to stay in touch. And I think that's our last slide other than discussion for the group. So I will open it up to questions from you all.
All right, y'all. Any questions or comments? I'll start with Board Member Mosner-Feltham.
Thank you. Congratulations on some of those increases. I have two questions. One is that I didn't notice Parent Square as one of the methods that you're using to communicate with families. Is there a reason for that, or just haven't integrated there yet?
There isn't. I am taking a note.
Okay. And the other thing, you had talked about the CEP schools having no financial or administrative barrier. And I knew about how that worked for the financial barrier, but I'm not clear on what the administrative barrier is or isn't. Can you just explain that a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm glad you asked, because there's a little bit of nuance to it. What I mean is that you do not have to file an application for a free or reduced meal benefit to eat free in a CEP. We do encourage everybody to continue filling out those applications so that we can use that information to make sure the district maximizes its funding potential. But we also say in our outgoing communications that is not a necessity for getting free meals in that school. That's the administrative barrier.
I understand. Thank you so much.
Of course, thank you.
Any other questions for this update? All right, so Board Member Maljo, your hand first, and then Board Member Saravo.
I want to thank you all so much for the amount of enthusiasm you bring to this presentation and to talking about nutrition for our young people. I feel like it's one of the kind of more delightful conversations we could have as a board. I really appreciate emphasizing the kind of global options we're allowing for. And there were a few times when you were presenting like kind of new items, the menu, that I was thinking about this book by Jacqueline Woodson, where students being made fun of for their lunch. And there's like this question about like, why doesn't my classmate see like the rice under the kimchi? And why doesn't my classmate know that rice is the most popular food on earth? And I thought like there were just several times where I was like, well, our district is making progress in terms of exposing our young people to cuisine from around the world and allowing them to value themselves and each other through that expression of inclusion. And I want to thank you all for how meaningful that work is. I hope that in the future, when you all present to us, you can talk to us about local vendors, in part because of sustainability, and also because I hope that we are investing local dollars in local food providers, right? Hopefully it is cheaper for milk to get to us from Wisconsin versus Illinois. And hopefully we get to invest in our dairy farmers and the folks who are paying into this district and into this greater community that is Wisconsin. I love that a lot of the food you all showed us tonight requires utensils to eat. My hope in the long run is that we are a plastic-free district, again, because I think that conversation about sustainability is really important. Vegan options and vegetarian options are tremendously exciting, and they have both a nutritional impact and an environmental impact, and I hope we continue to see you all do that work, and I so deeply appreciate it. Composting, I think, is a really relevant part of the conversation, but I also think in the long run, a conversation about food waste is something I hope we can hone in on, especially for our younger students who maybe are just gonna eat like a portion of the apple, you know? And then I do hope we are able to highlight and talk about kind of self-sustaining food. What are we harvesting from our gardens within the district, and how is that being utilized? And I think the Alice Waters model out of Berkeley is what I'm always hoping we're striving for in terms of self-sustaining ability to harvest produce. That's it for my comments. Thank you all so much for this presentation this evening.
Thank you.
President Nichols. I like this too. So when I went down to building services, I'm coming down to the board, seeing the bakery that wasn't doing much, and now seeing all the things that are coming out of there for breakfast is really awesome. And I think that one picture was taken probably right in that space.
That's correct, yeah.
That was there too.
Yeah.
And I was at the Centro Hispano event too, and my daughter's a picky eater, and she which one was it? It was with the rice.
The Chipotle chicken with rice.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the one that she went for. And that was nice to see at the event too, and then like the way that you guys were presenting it too, in more of a way that was just connecting with the event that was going on, and everybody being able to take part with that. I also like how there's different, like you have a lot of different choices on there. I have a lot of things that I can't eat, so like food versions are a thing. So having things that kind of more plant-based and just different types of choices than when we were growing up, and just seeing where you're taking the menu items, I think is really exciting. So I also know some families who are halal and kind of stick to the vegetarian, and sometimes there's not a ton of options to choose from, and this seems to maybe open up some of those choices a little bit. But then, would you agree with that too? Do you hear a lot of feedback from families who?
Yeah, I mean, I think I appreciate your comments, and I would say our goal is to develop vegetarian options that don't seem like they're only for vegetarians. I think in the same way we want to break down any stigma that kids or free reduced feel using the program, we want to break down and just say, look, you know, this is just good food. And that's the experience we've actually had, is students respond to some of these new vegetarian options who are not vegetarians. It's like, it's just delicious. So I want to try it. And I think that's good for all students.
Okay, that's great. Yeah, no, this is exciting to see, and I like your energy.
Thank you.
Thank you. I have one hopefully very short question, which is, you told us that kind of food costs are up. You told us that you added some labor, and this is kind of going back to the fact that you were able to close out last year with like transferring less of Fund 10 than originally projected.
Yep.
So I'm curious, with other things going up, how did you manage to actually come in under the projected amount for the Fund 10 transfer? What do you think drove that?
Well, just to address a clarifying point I would make. When I say we added labor, I really should have said we moved it.
Okay.
We put it in the places where it made the most sense to put it. We didn't actually add, for instance, add FTE. We just said this doesn't belong here, it belongs over here, because there's a new project like launching, right? So that's one way. So there wasn't a net addition in that way.
Okay.
And then I think, You know, the other thing is we do a colossal amount of work starting. It's actually going to start up soon, very soon, when we order USDA foods. So for any school district, public school district, ordering USDA foods are a huge part of the cost picture and maximizing your allocation from USDA. So we started in around January talking about how we can do that. The orders are due in March, and that's all for the coming fall. So really planning out, we sit down year over year and say, how can we make better use if we missed on any of the allocations, how can we make better use? Certainly did that last year. And then the summertime involves a ton of work. Honestly, it starts earlier than summer, but summer is when we sort of have time to step back and say, how fine tooth was the comb that we used to go over the menus and say, we're always, it's a balancing act to say, we don't want to serve only the things that students are familiar with, because that can be a pitfall. Say, well, if you want to avoid food waste and you want to make sure you just go with what you know students want, but then you don't do menu development. So we're always having to balance those two things. But the basic answer is we start in January for the following school year, saying how can we watch costs by maximizing USDA allocations?
Okay.
And then just combing the menu through over and over and over again, saying what are our assumptions about what students are going to want to eat?
Okay,
How much is that going to cost us, and where can we make savings?
that's awesome.
I will add, also, it's very, very hard focus on participation.
Yeah,
From that becomes having a stable environment. So as we started seeing what that environment looks like, challenges of curriculum time and instructional time is how do we make a lunch period stable? How do we make a kid feel invited? How do we make that experience be something that is not chaotic?
yes, yeah.
So that's where we made a very, very strong effort to do our playbook, which means standardization amongst the lunchrooms, right? Kid may go from far east school or far west school. How does they transfer inter-district? Also, then when you bring order in, chaos comes down, right? So having a long lunch period, people are struggling to eat, you start putting processes in place, things can get served quicker, noise levels come down, and students will engage. They'll avert from chaos, and we try to bring that in. As we start developing, participation start to tick up a little bit, right? So we've had a lot of our bigger schools pick up 1 or 2% throughout that process. 1 or 2% of growth, it's a lot. Right? It's converting a few of those kids from bringing a lunch or not eating at all to be percent. So as we work through that process, we picked a handful of schools last year to bring on that process, and this year was a big drive, seeing we saw the results.
Wow.
So then we have to drive this forward because it proves in what we've seen, right? So lunch periods are getting through better, kids were eating more, the noise level is significantly less, which tells you there's something happening, right? So we took a lot of that last year, which helped kind of reverse a little bit of the trends.
Yeah.
We really want to drive that forward this year to bring that stabilization.
Yeah, that's great. I had in my notes that you all had talked about really wanting to increase participation. And then Josh, as you were talking about the playbook, I wasn't connecting to how that having like a good way of like a process of helping young people get through lunch, it feeling less chaotic, more inviting, what they're sitting down, eating more, that also has a cost factor, because then you have more, you know what I mean? So I appreciate it kind of all coming together relative to the cost piece and increasing participation in our lunch and food programs.
Yeah, as Scott was saying, I mean, this really affects, I think, students on the younger end of the spectrum
Yeah,
quite a bit. They wouldn't feel comfortable trying meal in a really loud, chaotic environment. So we're trying to address that.
that's awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.
Board member, is that Maya? Okay, Vice President Pearson, sorry about that.
Yeah, thank you. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay, my question is just around like participation. So because we added Kennedy to the CP grouping, were there some things that we learned through Kennedy and the increase?
Oh, we lost you.
Can you guys see?
Maya, you're breaking up. All we heard was, are there some things that we learned?
Can you hear me now?
Well, yes.
Okay, are there some things that we've learned through the increased participation at Kennedy that we can attribute to the rest of the district?
I think my answer now would be it's fairly early days. They're 2 months into a new CEP status. But if there's one lesson I think that I would take away, it's the power of collaborative planning. That was far more the process where we asked, applied for CEP status and yes. A lot of that had to do with multiple meetings with Vanessa, talking through the setup. Where do the students go? Where do they want to go? How can we make sure to serve them in the best possible way? And that is something it's necessary. You know, just changing the status of the school can have some impact, but I expect to continue that collaboration. So that's something that we should apply to every one of those situations. It's true of the playbook as well, but I think it's true here too to say if we're going to remove the cost barrier, make the meals free, that's good. That's a good move. But how can we change the whole dynamic so students have better access to meals?
Yeah, I mean, I think I've said this before. It would be great to move the entire district to offer to all schools to have CEP status. And I think one thing that we've talked about in the past is the increase of participation that is needed and the resources. And so now, with some of the things that are happening at the federal government, do we foresee any barriers or foresee any other opportunities for the expansion of the program, or just to continue the way that we are now, especially if we are considering what is happening right now with SNAP and some of the other programs that, you know, some of these meals are the only meals that many of our kids get in a day. So are we seeing any impacts or can we foresee any opportunities and such for expansion and just to continue?
I think there's a big political challenge behind this. There's a lot of administrative talk about reducing the percentage for CEP. And I think that would be a huge negative effect to our district as far as financially. I think as the right way to go for our public, yes, in our community. However, there's a huge dynamic shift that's happening in political. I think we won't know until the dust kind of settles from this shutdown and what effects might happen. And to add to your point earlier, to have a CEP district is a large cultural shift that we'll have to be prepared for, because it's not only for our community but it's also our staff, our instructional times have to align together in order to have a meal period that's going to match, to have the accessibility. It takes longer times to do that. So it's a compromise of how we manage and run our schools on a daily basis. It's a big equation to go around, not only just financially, but it's a way we have to teach differently and at scheduled times in our schools for that time, or else we won't be successful.
I appreciate you talking to that, and it's really great to see how the meal program has grown over the years since I've been on the board. And particularly, it's really great to see some of the efficiencies that you all have put in place. I did volunteer at some of the schools during lunchtime and handed out lunch, but then also I volunteered at some of the schools for breakfast as well. And so I definitely got to see some of the changes in the talked with some of the staff about like just their experience, and you all have a really great team and they're really excited about their work that they do. So just kudos to food services and the growth that y'all have been doing. It's really exciting to see. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, board member Saravo, maybe final comment or question for this section, and then we'll move into our last and final topic for tonight.
Thank you, President.
Oh,
Or
I see Blair come on. Blair, did you have something that you wanted to add?
No, I just went off video while I was gonna.
Okay. Thanks. Sorry about that.
I was just thinking about too when one of the conversations I've had with asked me when I was coming on the board was that some of the it was a struggle for some people to stay, to be employed for such short periods of time. Like that was really challenging because of the short time frames. And sometimes the employees are needed for different positions. Do you feel that that is getting better? Does that make sense? I'm trying to remember how they had framed it.
We have a variety of staff. We have full-time school staff. We also have part-time, like 0.463 allocations, which they come for 4 hours at a time to help for supplemental peaks of the day. And we haven't had many issues challenging filling those roles. We let folks that just do part-time work. They have families or whatever they need. Obviously, people want to have more full-time, but we also balancing that equation of when's needed the most, because there are very quiet parts of the day. You're just throwing trays in and eating up, right? Some of the prep work is already done.
Yeah.
So we've done it this year with our rebalance of labor. It's been, hey, we don't need floaters at this particular in the food production center, but we need them for breakfast extra services or lunch extra services. And we've moved some of those allocations internally around to supplement or balance out. We used to be very heavy on one end and nothing. We're like, hey, how do we use these resources more effectively? Get more results, right? Better meals, better planning, better options, and using those small details make up big impacts.
Okay, that sounds good. I think it sounds like it's more consistent, better flow. And possibly
Yes, it's some new challenges, but it's working there.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you all. And no more really delicious looking food pictures.
The teaser
Without
for spring.
without a little sample up in here, okay? All right, Bob, can you believe it? We're finally at budget development.
That's all right. Good information. So really want to talk about, first, congratulate yourselves. We got a budget approved. It's a good budget. It's a balanced budget. I think it sets the framework. Kind of returns our history of balanced budgets or budgets that are building our fund balance. It couldn't happen at a better time. We're in the second year of our 4-year operating. I really think it shows you've invested considerably again in 25-26, but the investments equal our ongoing revenues. And hopefully we do what we do normally at the end of the year, build a little bit of a fund balance. But as budgeted, we're balanced. So that's all done now. We want to move to 26-27. So it starts. We continue to take a bit of a breather, Jessica, if you want to go to the next timeline. First, I want to talk about the positives of the timeline. We're in this. This is the process we've used for the last several years. And no big things are going to change, except for we're in the second year of a state biennial budget, so we know for certainty, at least legislature doesn't come back in session, and they likely will not come back in session to do any more on the budget. We at least know we're getting no new general aids, but we do have 325 per member. We do have state categorical reimbursement at 42% budgeted, and likely something less, probably 39%. This year, next year, budgeted at 45%, which is an increase, assuming we're going to be budgeting additional state revenue. So those are all positives in terms of managing and projecting our revenues to cover some of that existing cost. So remember, as that categorical aid reimbursement goes up from the state, our need for the general fund goes down to transfer into our Fund 27. So helps us in a big part on keeping a balanced budget, expenditures equaling ongoing revenues. And so we're very early on the far left of our timeline right now, and we're gonna really get into it deeper in January. Jesse, so if you want to go to the next slide, you spent a lot of time at the instruction work group talking about our strategic framework excellence together. That'll lead, as it always does, our budgeting, right? We have the 5 focus areas. We're going to continue to work developing out those 5 focus areas with performance indicators. And so we'll want to be sure to call it strategic budgeting, making sure our budget matches our focus areas to be able to measure and be successful as we move forward and continue our investments. Of course, those investments, as they always are going to be used and analyzed through our existing equity tool that we have to ensure equitable distribution of resources and continue to close opportunity gaps. Okay, the next slide, Jesse, is so the slides you're gonna see, you've seen for 9 months, right? What the slides are gonna be reflective of now are our final approved budget for the fall. Also, our most recent enrollment estimates that drive our revenue limits. And then just the final information that was included in the budget book and updating some of our projections where they finally shake out after October 15th. And we'll continue to update our enrollment counts because the state allows us to account for any child that shows up at least one day before that count date and one day after that count date. So as the year goes on, we might be able to add to our through Friday, September count, which we will continue to do working with our enrollment team and our registrar office here in the district to make sure we are counting every one of the kids that we're educating to maximize our revenue. But as a reminder, fund balance started at 100.7 million. We're budgeting to end at 100.7 million. And as always, I always hope that we can come under budgeted in terms of expenditures and increase that balance. But two things, 100.7 million is a good balance for us to have. And as I mentioned, as when I started tonight, the district does have a pretty good track record of recent history of budgeting where we build our fund balance or at least stay in the positive. A couple of times over the last few years where we have been negative, but I think what you've done this year with the budget is really the format we want to continue to use as we look forward, not only because we're going to continue to need to rely on our local taxpayers to support the majority of our district, but we're right in the middle of our operating plan, right? And I think we are really in a good position. Now, we mentioned a little bit on USDA and our food reimbursement. We did submit our claims. Josh, working with the accounting team, submitted our claims today. We expect to get that revenue on November 24th. With commitments that money will be there. But as Scott mentioned, we really don't know what's going to happen for sure with the Trump administration and the shutdown still occurring and where our federal revenues are. So although we're in a great position to manage and cover some of these losses potentially from the federal government, that's our real uncertainty for 2027, right? Our enrollment projections and then where's the federal government going to be continuing to share in the costs and investments of public school systems anywhere in the country, but including Madison. So, all right, next slide. So as always, it's all about, in my mind, revenues. Obviously, costs are important on the other side of the equation, but revenues in terms of how the state supports revenues, how we operate schools in Wisconsin. It starts with revenue limit. It starts with enrollment projections, gives us our overall operating authority in terms of incoming revenues. And then the offsetting piece of the incoming revenues are the categorical aid, which is a huge area, beneficial area for the Madison Metropolitan School District in terms of the state putting additional resources into it. Because as I've shared with you many, many times, we don't benefit a whole lot from general aid or equalization aid increases because we are 90% supported by the property taxes. Where we benefit the most is when the state continues to increase money for specific programs like implementing IEPs and the state and federal government sharing in those costs, right? We benefit the most from that given just our high property value and where we spend compared to the rest of the state. So those were good wins for us in terms of state support for our schools, really helped us get to that balanced budget for 25-26. Jesse, you want to go to the next slide? These are things that you've seen, and as I said, these are now updated for our final revenue limit calculation based on end of October enrollment projections, and we are as we projected now for the last 6 months to be above in terms of the rate of inflation, which as you can see a few years ago, we needed that because our revenue limit increase was nowhere generating our cost in terms of linking to inflation. But this year compared to last year ends up being just under a 10% increase, which is good news for us as we continue to balance and have our budget in terms of operating revenues and looking forward to 26-27. Next slide, Jesse. As I mentioned, our counts will continue to change, not only our counts, the middle of the 2025 column, the September FTE, that's the Madison Metropolitan School District, September full-time equivalency of 25,558. Again, FTE, we have over 26,000 students, but the FTE calculation drops below. The other count that can change during the year are the independent charter schools. Remember, it's a real critical, our schools are funded on current year information. So you're always gonna have an unknown as we budget going into the fall, but we will pay close attention to those numbers. But overall, our FT is at 26,200. Jesse, go into the next slide. As I said, it's in this essence a flat projection in terms of where we are for 3 years on the revenue limit. Now, officially, we are in declining enrollment, but not by much. 11 FTE, 2-3 year compared rolling averages. The importance is the 3 years it takes to fully get impact into our revenue limit. So as we've increased the last couple of years and pretty much essentially flat this year, it's gonna take us yet another year to fully feel the rise in our FTE as we move forward. So we'll continue to look at projections. As part of our strategic framework, we've talked about the need to develop some 3-year and 5-year budgeting plans, which requires us to do 3 and 5-year enrollment projections, which is a challenging but fun thing to have in terms of as we grow in Dane County, what does that mean to Madison Metropolitan School? Let's see one more again. Here's that 3-year rolling average compared to the prior 3-year rolling average. You'll see the last 3 years are in essence a flat line, a little bit up, a little bit down, but for all intents and purposes, flat enrollment in terms of revenue projections. Here's a graph that's again reflective of what was in the approved budget. You can see the significant increase approved by the voters in 24-25. 25-26 a year we are in, highlighted there. That increase from 26 to 25 is just under $42 million in terms of a base increase, which puts us in a real good position in terms of this year. As comparison for 26-27, when we're looking at the budget, we've only asked and the board has approved 20 million in new revenues next fall compared to 30 million this year. So I'm showing 42 million here without me spending any time at all, right? Simple math. We're gonna have 10 million less in ongoing revenues. So really it's gonna be important for us to, just like the examples of the food and nutrition program, taking a look at base resources and how you're using that staff and resources and refocusing and making sure today's needs, today's priorities to be more efficient and more effective. We're gonna be needing to do that for our entire district for 26. We're in very good financial position. And we planned and know we're gonna have less revenues built in from the voter approval. Now, what the state does in the future, we don't know. What the federal government's gonna do, we don't know for certain. But we are in a good position, even with 10 million less looking into 26-27, in terms of where we have resources. Stop for questions.
All right.
Yeah, I appreciate like a certain level of uncertainty in relationship to the federal government right now. I am confused by the statement, we're not sure what the state is gonna do, because my understanding going into next year is that we are in the second year of a biannual budget and we know exactly what the state's gonna do.
We do know what the state's gonna do. That's important clarification. What my hope is looking into the year beyond 26-27, and I continue to be optimistic that the state is going to return to sharing in the cost of our local public schools. We are far from that where we used to be 15 years ago. So I'm hoping in the next year or two, we get a different flavor in terms of the need and the belief of priority of funding local public schools.
I share that hope. I also feel a great deal of appreciation to our current governor for the investment in education that was prioritized in this biannual budget. And I hope that I'm correct in saying that biannual budget represented an increase in investment for the year 26-27. Is that an incorrect assumption?
I think it's correct, particularly true for Madison in terms of, as I mentioned, the state reimbursement for special education is going from just over 30% to 42% as budget. Now,
That's a
the
big deal.
legislature, it didn't come through on a some sufficient appropriation, there's some certain appropriation, which means there's only enough money that's been appropriated. So most of us believe it's gonna be something less than 42%, call it 30, call it 40%. But it's still a significant increase from 30%. So it's an increase in terms of state support. What the legislature did not do was provide any additional money for general school aids, general equalization aids, right? Which means the $325 revenue per member across the state, for all intents and purposes, is entirely on the property, because the legislature did not put any money in general aids, which is historically new not to have put any money at all in general aids over this year and next year of the biennium, right? So even though it doesn't directly benefit Madison, it's still important for the legislature to share in the cost of our local schools in a huge way to reduce property taxes. And they didn't do that. They didn't do that.
I greatly appreciate like the need to alleviate the cost to the local taxpayer, especially given some of the volatility of our economy. I do just want to make sure I understand what you're saying, which is there is an increase per pupil, but because that increase isn't backed up by the state's resources, we have gained additional authority to tax people locally to a greater extent for per pupil revenue, which is usually a way in which our state contributes.
Correct.
Okay. I think that's important to understand, and I hope we continue to drive home that point, in part because the state has done a lot to restrict the authority of local school districts. And so there is something to be gained in having that authority. And simultaneously, I think it puts a tremendous amount of pressure on local taxpayers to cover a really significant percentage of the costs related to public education. And I think we all want greater investment from the state. However, I do hope that having this biannual budget this year creates greater clarity than what we had last year.
It does. It does.
Board, was that it, Ollie?
That's it, I'm sorry.
Board member Mosner Feltham.
Thank you for your presentation. I have a question about the lower First Friday count. I don't know, Bob, that you're the right person to direct it to. But I remember when those numbers first came out, there was a comment like, let's figure out what happened here. Has that like analysis happened? Maybe this is a question for Dr. Gothard.
Well, I didn't hear the lower what counts.
Well, the third Friday September counts lower than last year.
Did I say first? I'm sorry.
We have our first board member, Walter Faltham. We have a enrollment strategy meeting next week. This week. The 7th, next week. So it'll be our first time coming together as a strategy team to look at it exactly.
Okay.
To give that team a little bit of a chance and just see what kind of, if there are any anomalies or anything that we can learn from that. But absolutely, it's something we're interested in. I think I've shared with some of you that around the country, we've seen huge swings. And large part, our immigrant populations in many of our big cities are down by tens of thousands of students. But I don't have anything to say that definitively here. That has been, some of the areas that we're down in.
Yeah, that was my suspicion when I saw the numbers too, and I was just curious if the team had met yet to do that analysis, and it sounds like that's coming next week. And then I think my second question also is for you, Dr. Gothard. I heard Bob talking about looking at, he says we're going to have to do some real careful and thorough work on what is it that we're doing that we're going to continue to do, and what might we stop doing. And I wondered, as a result of our constrained budget, and I wonder if you could connect the dots between that question or that statement that Bob made and the portions of the I'm so sorry that I have forgotten the name of the project. The one that encompasses the boundary review.
Building for the future.
Yes, thank you. If you could connect the dots between what Bob brought up at the end of his presentation and the next phases of the building for the future once the attendance and boundary review is completed.
I mean, we're at such a conceptual phase of building for the future that to assign any dollar amounts to it right now, I just don't think would give our project its due. You know, our time to truly analyze it, but that'll certainly be a factor of what we bring back in recommendations. I mean, finances are going to impact our ability to make changes. The one thing that I'd like to share, you know, for all of our community right now is that we're in a situation where we've talked far more about investments we want to make, and we haven't necessarily talked about restrictions or reductions. And I know that's not a popular discussion to have, but it's our reality. If you look at any inflationary index around the country in any industry right now, you know that the costs of living and doing business are going up at rates where there's no replenishment of revenue coming in. And that's even with flat enrollment, let alone if we are in any sort of even gradual decline. I hope we're not, but we have to prepare in that way so that we make sure that we're setting the district up for sustainability.
Great. And then do I understand correctly that the process of having those conversations will take place within the building for our future project? Okay, and the reason I ask is because at the very first presentation that we saw today, we talk about program evaluation, right? So in a position where we have to talk about restrictions, we want to be making sure that what we are investing in is producing returns for the experiences that our students have in our school and their outcomes for them as individuals and for our city as a whole. And so I'm just trying to understand where that conversation is going to come in. And I think I understand that's going to be part of building for our future, and it should be. I just want confirmation on that.
We are, and again, I think we're a couple of years out. I see Cindy's still with us too. Cindy, you can come on screen if you'd like. I think we're a couple of years out as well, just as part of the plan, but also, you know, terms like, are we going to substitute or exchange a program, start something new in an existing body versus starting something brand new building, completely new curriculum. You know, there's so many different ways that new can be developed in our school district, that those are all things we're going to have to analyze.
Great, thank you.
Cindy, anything to add?
I would just add, in addition to building for the future, as Bob mentioned, our MMSD Excellence Together, I think, is also going to help us focus and either prioritize or reprioritize areas as well. And that may also uncover places of what we might need to stop doing, programs, practices, etc. So building for the future, yes, but I think also in the immediate will also be our MMSD Excellence Together plan.
Thank you. Well, I really want to thank you both and thank Bob and the whole team for your thoughtfulness and planfulness on these topics. In this uncertain world and in this uncertain work, it brings me a lot of calm to know that you're working so methodically and so strategically on these important issues.
Thank you. Board Member Saravo, I can't remember, did you say you had a question or comment?
Yes.
Okay, yes.
Thank you, President Nichols. I appreciated all of the things that you were saying, Board Member Multro, because this is so complicated, but to hear it out loud and to just break it down. And I like the way that you're providing us with a lot of details and a lot of visuals to go along with all of this. So it's better to understand, especially over the timeline I've seen in the past and projecting forward. I find it incredibly frustrating talking about the special education reimbursement rates, considering voucher students get 90% while we kind of struggle to make our way up the ladder and try to meet us anywhere, and constantly pulling from the gen ed fund in order to cover what they don't give us for special education funding, but those students are going to get what they need in our classes either way. And for them to use that as I think a distraction to a certain degree. We'll put a whole bunch more towards special education since we keep talking about it, and then we'll just flatline the rest of it. I think is really insulting and it frustrates me to no end considering how long I've been watching this cycle and my daughter utilizes and needs the programming that special education provides, that you do not have those same protections in private schools. And the accountability is very different. So I think everything that you are, things that you bring forward, I appreciate. And it's a shared frustration, but also knowing that we're going in, you know, in a good direction and that you're always planning forward. And we always know that the kids are going to are thought of first is really important, because there's a lot of times where I question where our tax dollars are going when it comes down to the legislators, and funding our public schools appropriately will become a priority. There we go.
I don't see any other hands raised right now. I know, Bob, it looked like you had one more slide on property tax levy forecast. Is that something that you wanted to cover tonight, or was that more of an optional?
This is just what you voted on in October. This is just the fall budget included in the slide. I just think it's important to have it as a touch point as we talk about 26, 27, looking back at 25, 26.
Yeah.
This is included in the fall approved budget book. You know how much I love all those numbers, so they just tell a story, but we talk about that another day. But this is the budget, the dollar amount, so.
Dr. Gothard, anything you want to add as we close out tonight on any of the topics? Boundary review, food and nutrition, HR,
No,
budget development?
yeah, thank you all teams for your presentations. I think it goes without saying, we're in this position in large part because of our taxpayers. Grateful for support, there's no doubt about it. And again, districts around our state are struggling. If you keep up with what's being written around the state, we've got a lot of work to do. And I think, you know, we're gonna have to act collectively, and we're working really hard as a Dane County group, Dane County Extended Group right now, to establish a platform that we can truly demand public education is fully funded. Our young people deserve it, our staff deserve it, and this community certainly deserves it.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Thanks to your team for all of the hard work and bringing such rich updates tonight to the board and also to the community. And with that, I'll take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
All right, thank you, y'all. We are adjourned.
So.